When a dying nurse collapsed into the arms of New York's most dangerous man, she had no idea that falling would save her life, or that the bruises he discovered would seal someone else's fate. This is the story of Lena Brooks, a woman who survived hell, fell into darkness, and found the only man powerful enough to make her abuser disappear. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below and hit that like button. Let's see how far Lena's story travels tonight. The fluorescent lights of Mercy General Hospital had long since burned themselves into Lena Brooks' retinas. 48 hours. 2 consecutive shifts. 16 patients, 3 code blues, and 1 elderly woman who'd held Lena's hand through her final breaths while whispering about grandchildren who never visited. Lena's feet had stopped hurting somewhere around hour 36. That was when the numbness set in, the kind that started in your toes and crept upward until even your thoughts felt distant and muffled, like voices heard through water. She pushed through the hospital's revolving doors into the February night, and the cold hit her like a physical blow. New York City stretched before her in its usual chaotic symphony of honking cabs, shouting vendors, and the perpetual construction that seemed to follow her everywhere she went. The city that never sleeps, they called it. Lena used to find that romantic. Now it just felt exhausting. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't need to check it to know who it was. Not tonight, she thought, pulling her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders. Please, not tonight. But the buzzing continued, insistent, demanding. Lena's hand trembled as she pulled out the phone. 3 missed calls, 7 text messages, each one a variation on the same theme. Where are you? Why aren't you answering? You better not be ignoring me. Her stomach clenched. The last time she'd ignored him, he'd shown up at the hospital, made a scene in the lobby. The head nurse had pulled her aside afterward with that look, the one that said, "I know what's happening to you," without ever saying the words out loud. She'd promised it wouldn't happen again. Lena typed back with shaking fingers. Just finished shift. Heading home now. The response came immediately. About damn time. You got money for dinner? I'm starving. Of course he was. When wasn't he? Lena checked her wallet. $43 until next Friday's paycheck. She'd already worked 70 hours this week, but overtime pay wouldn't hit her account for another 2 weeks. There was the emergency fund she'd been building, $217 hidden in a tampon box under the bathroom sink. But that was for getting out. That was for the moment when she finally found the courage to run. Not yet. Soon, but not yet. I'll pick something up, she texted back. The subway entrance yawned before her like a mouth. Lena descended into the underground, her exhaustion so complete that she barely registered the faces around her. Businessmen in expensive suits, teenagers with headphones bleeding bass, a woman clutching shopping bags and muttering to herself about prices. All strangers, all unaware that the woman standing among them was running on fumes and fear. The platform was more crowded than usual. Track maintenance on the express line had diverted everyone to local trains, packing bodies shoulder to shoulder in the stale underground air. Lena wedged herself between a man reading a newspaper and a college student FaceTiming someone in what sounded like Mandarin. Her vision swam. Just need to sit down, she thought. Just need to get home, eat something, sleep for a few hours before the morning shift. The familiar rumble announced the train's approach. The crowd surged forward, and Lena moved with them, her body operating on autopilot. She'd made this commute 5 nights a week for the past 2 years. She could do it in her sleep, which was essentially what she was doing. The train burst from the tunnel, brakes shrieking. The doors hadn't even fully opened before people began pushing forward. Lena felt herself carried along in the wave of bodies, her feet barely touching the ground. That's when the darkness came. It started at the edges of her vision, creeping inward like ink spreading through water. Her ears filled with a high-pitched ringing. The floor tilted sideways, or maybe she was tilting. She couldn't tell anymore. Her knees buckled. No, she thought desperately. Not here, not now. But her body had finally reached its limit. Lena felt herself falling, the dirty subway platform rising up to meet her face. She had just enough time to think how embarrassing this would be, how people would step over her like they stepped over everything else in this city, how she'd wake up with a concussion and still have to go home to... Strong hands caught her, not the impersonal grab of someone trying to prevent a lawsuit, not the awkward fumbling of a good Samaritan doing their civic duty. These hands knew exactly what they were doing, one arm sliding behind her shoulders, the other beneath her knees, lifting her clear off the ground before she could hit concrete. Lena's eyes fluttered open to find herself staring up at a face she'd never seen before. Male. Early 30s, maybe. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, all strong angles and sharp edges, except for his eyes. Those were impossibly dark, almost black in the fluorescent lighting, and they were looking down at her with an intensity that should have been frightening but somehow wasn't. "I've got you," he said, and his voice matched everything else about him, deep, controlled, absolute. "You're safe." The crowd had parted around them like water around a stone. People were staring, but not at her, at him. And there was something in their faces, a kind of recognition mixed with wariness, that Lena's exhausted brain couldn't quite process. "I'm fine," she heard herself say, even though she very clearly wasn't. "You can put me down. I just need to—" "You need to sit down before you collapse again." He was already moving, carrying her as though she weighed nothing, stepping away from the train that was now boarding without them. "There's a bench over there." Lena wanted to protest. She needed to get home. She needed to pick up dinner. She needed to not be late because late meant angry, and angry meant— But her body betrayed her, going limp in his arms. When was the last time someone had held her like this? Like she was something precious instead of something to be used? She couldn't remember. The man set her down on a bench with surprising gentleness, then crouched in front of her, studying her face with those impossibly dark eyes. Up close, she could see he was wearing an expensive suit, the kind that cost more than her monthly rent. His watch caught the light, and Lena glimpsed enough zeros to make her slightly dizzy all over again. "When did you last eat?" he asked. The question was so unexpected that Lena answered honestly. "Yesterday morning, I think. Maybe the morning before." Something flickered across his face. Anger, but not at her. "And sleep?" "I just worked a double shift, 48 hours. Jesus." He sat back on his heels, running a hand through his hair. "Stay here. Don't move." He was gone before she could respond, disappearing into the crowd with the kind of confidence that suggested he was used to being obeyed. Lena sat there, her mind slowly beginning to function again, trying to piece together what had just happened. She'd almost passed out. A stranger had caught her. And now that stranger had told her to stay put like she was a child or a dog or— Her phone buzzed. "Where the hell are you? Train should have gotten you home by now." Lena's hands started shaking again. She typed back, "Train delayed, track maintenance. Well, hurry the fuck up. And don't forget dinner." She was trying to formulate a response when the stranger returned, carrying a bottle of orange juice and a wrapped sandwich from one of the platform vendors. He handed both to her without ceremony. "Drink first," he said. "Then eat. Slowly." Lena stared at the items in her hands. "I can't pay you back right now. I don't get paid until—" "I didn't ask you to pay me back." He settled onto the bench beside her, maintaining a careful distance. Close enough to catch her if she started to fall again, far enough not to crowd her. "Drink." The orange juice was cold and sweet, and possibly the best thing Lena had ever tasted. She didn't realize how thirsty she was until the first swallow, and then she was drinking desperately, trying not to gulp it down too fast. "Slower," the man said gently. "Your stomach's probably empty. You'll make yourself sick." Lena forced herself to pause, lowering the bottle. "Thank you. Really? You didn't have to—" "Yeah, I did." He was watching her with that same intense focus, and Lena suddenly became aware of how she must look. 48 hours in scrubs that had seen better days. Hair pulled back in a messy bun that was more mess than bun at this point. No makeup. Dark circles under her eyes that probably needed their own zip code. And this man looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine ad for expensive whiskey. "I'm Marco," he said. "Marco DeLuca." The name sounded vaguely familiar, but Lena's exhausted brain couldn't place it. "Lena Brooks." "Nice to meet you, Lena Brooks." He nodded toward the sandwich. "Eat." She unwrapped it, turkey and Swiss, fresh lettuce, real tomatoes, and took a small bite. Her stomach immediately woke up, growling so loudly that she actually blushed. Marco's lips twitched, the closest thing to a smile she'd seen from him. "When's your next shift?" "Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Tomorrow, he cut himself off, that anger flickering across his face again. You're going to work another shift after not eating or sleeping for 2 days? I need the hours. Lena took another bite, feeling strength slowly returning to her limbs. Rent's due next week. Where do you live? The question was casual, but something made Lena hesitate. Her phone buzzed again in her pocket. She could feel it against her leg, but she ignored it. Brooklyn, she said finally. Sunset Park. Marco nodded slowly, still watching her with that unnerving intensity. You live alone? And there it was. The question she'd been dreading without knowing why. Lena opened her mouth to lie, to say yes, to maintain the fiction she'd been building for months. But something about this man made lying feel impossible. Those dark eyes saw too much, knew too much. No, she whispered. The single word hung between them like a confession. Marco didn't move, but something shifted in his posture. A kind of stillness that reminded Lena of a predator that had just spotted prey. Boyfriend? She nodded. Does he know you haven't eaten in 2 days? He's been busy. Job hunting. Right. Marco's voice had gone very flat. Job hunting. Lena's phone was buzzing continuously now. She pulled it out, saw 6 new messages, all variations on where are you and answer me and threats disguised as concern. Her hands started shaking again, hard enough that she nearly dropped the phone. Marco noticed. Of course he noticed. Let me see your arms, he said quietly. What? Your arms. Let me see them. Lena clutched the sandwich tighter, her jacket sleeves pulled down to her wrists. I don't know what you... Yes, you do. Marco's voice was still gentle, but there was steel underneath now. I saw them when I caught you. The bruises. The ones you're trying to hide. The subway platform suddenly felt very small, very cold. Lena became aware of other people walking past, living their lives, completely unaware that her entire world was crumbling on this bench. It's not what you think, she heard herself say. Tell me what I think. Marco leaned forward slightly, his elbows on his knees, those dark eyes never leaving her face. I think someone is hurting you. I think you're working yourself to death trying to save enough money to get away from him. I think you haven't eaten because he takes your money. And I think the reason your hands are shaking right now has nothing to do with low blood sugar and everything to do with those text messages. Each word landed like a physical blow. Lena felt tears building behind her eyes, hot and desperate, and so tired. You don't understand, she whispered. Then help me understand. I can't just leave, it's complicated. There's a lease, and all my stuff is there, and he'll... She stopped, biting her lip hard enough to taste blood. He'll what? Marco's voice had gone very soft, very dangerous. Lena shook her head, unable to continue. Her phone buzzed again, and this time when she looked down, the message made her blood run cold. I know you're not on the train. I checked the tracker. Where the fuck are you? Tracker. Right. The app he'd installed on her phone 6 months ago. The one he said was just to make sure you're safe when she worked late shifts. She hadn't been on the train. She'd been sitting on this bench for 10 minutes, and the app had told him exactly that. I have to go, Lena said, standing up too quickly. The platform swayed, and Marco was on his feet instantly, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. Thank you for the food and the juice, but I really have to... Lena. The way he said her name stopped her cold. Let me help you. You can't. Yes, I can. Marco reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a card, simple, cream-colored, with just a name and a phone number embossed in black. Call me. Anytime, day or night. If you need somewhere to go, if you need help, if you need anything, call me. Lena stared at the card like it might bite her. Why would you do that? You don't even know me. I know enough. Marco pressed the card into her hand, closing her fingers around it. And I have resources, more than you realize. There was something in the way he said it, resources, that made Lena look at him more closely, really look at him. The expensive suit, the watch that probably cost more than a car, the way people gave him a wide berth when they walked past, the name that had sounded familiar when he'd first said it. Marco DeLuca. Oh, oh. Lena had never been particularly interested in the city's underworld, but even she had heard whispers. The DeLuca family. Real estate, they called it officially. Everyone knew there was more to it than that. Protection, enforcement, the kind of business that operated in shadows and sealed deals with more than just signatures. She was holding a card from a man who probably had more blood on his hands than she had bandaged in her entire nursing career. "I can't," she whispered, trying to hand the card back. Marco didn't take it. "You can. And when you're ready, you will." Another buzz from her phone. This message was all caps. "Get home now." "I have to go," Lena said again, and this time Marco let her step away. "The card," he said as she turned toward the platform. "Keep it somewhere safe. Somewhere he won't find it." Lena didn't ask how Marco knew it was a he. She just nodded, slipping the card deep into her bra, the only place she could think of that was truly hers. The next train arrived 3 minutes later. Lena got on, found a seat, and watched through the window as Marco DeLuca stood on the platform, hands in his pockets, watching her disappear into the tunnel. She told herself she'd throw the card away when she got home. She knew she wouldn't. The apartment was dark when Lena finally unlocked the door, her hands fumbling with keys that suddenly felt too heavy. She could hear the television, some sports game playing at top volume, and smell stale beer and old takeout. "About fucking time," came the voice from the living room. Lena closed her eyes for a brief moment, gathering what little strength she had left. Then she walked inside, letting the door click shut behind her like a cell door closing. Derek was sprawled on the couch in the same clothes she'd left him in yesterday morning. Or maybe they were different clothes. It was hard to tell anymore. Everything about him had started to blur together. The drinking, the anger, the excuses that had once sounded almost reasonable. "Where's dinner?" he asked without looking at her. I need to run to the bodega. I didn't have time to stop on the way home." Now he looked at her, and Lena saw the familiar tightness around his eyes. The set of his jaw that meant he was working himself up to something. "Didn't have time? What the fuck have you been doing for the past hour?" The train was delayed, track maintenance, everyone had to Bullshit! Derek pushed himself off the couch, and Lena instinctively took a step back. "I saw the tracker. You've been sitting at the 34th Street station for 20 minutes. Who were you with?" "No one. I wasn't feeling well. I just needed to sit down for a minute." "You're lying." He was moving closer now, and Lena felt her back hit the door. "You think I'm stupid? You think I don't know when you're lying to me?" "Derek, please. I just worked 48 hours straight. I'm exhausted. I almost passed out on the platform." Almost passed out. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's convenient. And let me guess, some knight in shining armor helped you? Gave you his number? Told you he could take better care of you than I do?" The accusation was so close to the truth that Lena felt her face flush. Derek saw it immediately. "I fucking knew it." His hand shot out, grabbing her arm right over the bruises from 3 days ago, and Lena couldn't stop the small cry of pain that escaped. Who was he? No one. "Derek, you're hurting me." "I'm hurting you?" He laughed again, that terrible sound. "You're hurting me, Lena. Running around behind my back, making me look like a fool. All I've done is love you, take care of you, and this is how you repay me?" Take care of me, Lena thought, feeling something cold and hard settling in her chest. "You haven't worked in 8 months. You haven't bought groceries in longer than that. You drink my money and wear my patience and break my skin, and you call it love." But she didn't say any of that. Instead, she said what she always said. "I'm sorry." Sorry doesn't cut it anymore. Derek's grip tightened, and Lena felt tears building again. Different tears this time, born of pain and fear and a rising sense that something was about to break. "You need to learn. You need to understand that you're mine, and no one else gets to..." Her phone rang. The sound cut through the apartment like a gunshot. Derek's eyes went to her pocket, then back to her face. "Who the fuck is calling you at 11 p.m.? "Probably the hospital. They might need someone to cover a shift." "Answer it. Speakerphone." Lena's hand shook as she pulled out her phone. Unknown number. Her thumb hovered over the decline button, but Derek grabbed her wrist. "Answer it." She pressed accept and speaker simultaneously. Hello? Lena Brooks? The voice was male, smooth, professional. This is Dr. Chen from Mercy General. I'm calling about your shift tomorrow morning. Lena's knees went weak with relief. Yes? We've had a staffing change. We need to know if you can come in 2 hours early, 5 a.m. instead of 7. Lena looked at Derek, saw him watching her with narrowed eyes. Yes, I can do that. Excellent. See you at 5. The line went dead. Derek held onto her wrist for another moment, then released her with a shove that sent her stumbling sideways. 5 a.m. You better actually be there. I will be. Get me dinner, and it better be hot this time. Lena grabbed her jacket and her keys, desperate for any excuse to leave the apartment, even for 20 minutes. The bodega on the corner was still open, its fluorescent lights a beacon in the darkness. She bought chicken over rice and a Gatorade, using the last of the cash in her wallet. The owner, Mr. Kim, looked at her the way people had started looking at her lately, with pity and concern carefully masked as politeness. You work too much, he said gently as he handed her the change. You should rest. Soon, Lena promised, and she almost believed it. The walk back to the apartment took 90 seconds. She counted each step, trying to stretch them into 91, 92. When she opened the door, Derek was back on the couch, beer in hand. She set his food on the coffee table without a word. You gonna eat? He asked. I had something at the hospital. The lie came easily now, worn smooth from repetition. Good. I need you to wash my clothes tomorrow. I got a job interview on Monday. It was the first she'd heard of any interview. That's great. Where? Construction company. My buddy Rick knows the foreman. Derek took a long drink, eyes never leaving the television. Gonna be good money. Then you can cut back on those extra shifts, spend more time at home where you belong. Where you belong. Like she was a possession, a thing to be kept and controlled. Lena felt the card pressing against her skin, tucked safely in her bra. A small, hard rectangle that felt like possibility. I'm gonna take a shower, she said quietly. Derek waved her away without responding. The bathroom was the only room in the apartment with a lock on the door. Lena turned it now, then sat on the edge of the bathtub and pulled out Marco DeLuca's card. Simple. Elegant. Just a name and a number. Call me. Anytime, day or night. Resources, he'd said. More than you realize. Lena thought about the way people had looked at him on the subway platform. The expensive suit and the confident way he carried himself. The darkness in his eyes when she'd mentioned the text messages. She thought about Derek's hands on her arms, the bruises that bloomed purple and yellow and never quite had time to heal before new ones appeared. The money that disappeared into beer and excuses. The 8 months of promising to find work while she worked herself into the ground. She thought about collapsing on a subway platform and strong hands catching her before she hit the ground. You're safe, Marco had said. And for those few minutes, she had been. Lena pulled out her phone and programmed the number into her contacts, but not under his name. Instead, she typed Dr. Chen, just in case Derek ever went through her phone again. Then she stepped into the shower and let the hot water wash away tears she didn't remember starting to cry. The 5 a.m. shift call hadn't been real, of course. Lena knew that the moment she'd heard the voice on the phone. Too smooth, too professional, not Dr. Chen at all. But it had given her an excuse to leave early the next morning, while Derek was still passed out on the couch. She grabbed her bag and her keys and stepped out into the pre-dawn darkness. The subway at this hour was different, cleaner, quieter, filled with essential workers heading to jobs that kept the city running while everyone else slept. Lena found a seat and pulled out her phone. She had 4 hours before her real shift started. 4 hours of freedom that felt like a gift. Without thinking too hard about it, she opened her messages and found the contact labeled Dr. Chen. Her thumbs hovered over the keyboard for a long moment. What would she even say? Thank you for the juice and sandwich? Thank you for catching me? Thank you for seeing what everyone else pretends not to notice? In the end, she typed something simple. This is Lena. From last night. I wanted to say thank you again. She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then immediately regretted it. It was 5:30 in the morning. He was probably asleep. He probably didn't even remember her. She was just another face in a crowded city, a stranger who'd had a moment of weakness, and her phone buzzed. "How are you feeling?" Lena stared at the screen. He'd responded in less than 30 seconds. At 5:30 in the morning. "Better," she typed back. "I ate the sandwich and slept for a few hours." The truth was she'd slept for maybe 90 minutes total, but that still counted as a few if you were generous with your definition. "Good. Where are you right now?" Lena's fingers hesitated. Subway. Heading to work. 5 a.m. shift? She smiled despite herself. He'd heard. "No. 7 a.m. I just needed to leave early." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Lena, are you safe?" Such a simple question. Such a complicated answer. "For now," she typed. The dots again. Then, "That's not the same as yes." "No, it really wasn't." "I know," she wrote back. "The offer still stands, anytime, day or night." Lena closed her eyes, letting the subway's rocking motion soothe her. When she opened them again, she'd made a decision. "Can I ask you something? Anything. Why are you helping me? You don't know me. For all you know, I could be lying. I could be—" The response came back immediately. "You have 5 finger-shaped bruises on your left arm and 3 on your right. You flinched when I touched your elbow. You haven't eaten in 2 days because someone took your money. And when your phone rang, you looked like you were facing a firing squad. Those aren't things people lie about, Lena. Those are things people survive." She read the message 3 times, feeling something crack open in her chest. "I don't know how to leave," she finally admitted. "I've tried. I've thought about it, but every time I start to plan, I just freeze. It's like my brain shuts down. That's normal. It's a survival mechanism. Your mind is trying to protect you from making a move before you're ready. What if I'm never ready? You're already more ready than you think." A pause. Then, "What time does your shift end?" 3 p.m. Can you meet me somewhere after?" Lena's heart started racing. This was real. This was happening. If she said yes, if she took this step, there would be no going back to pretending everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine. Everything hadn't been fine for a very long time. "Where?" she typed. Marco sent an address, a coffee shop in Manhattan, nowhere near her apartment or the hospital, neutral ground. "I'll be there," Lena wrote. "Bring your ID, your nursing license, and anything else important that you can carry without him noticing it's gone." She stared at that message for a long time, understanding finally clicking into place. This wasn't just coffee. This was an extraction. "Okay," she sent back. Then she put her phone away and watched the city wake up through the subway windows, feeling something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. The shift passed in a blur of routine, vitals and medications, discharge papers and insurance forms, a diabetic patient who needed education on proper foot care, a teenager with a broken arm who kept asking when he could play basketball again. Lena moved through it all on autopilot, her mind already 3 steps ahead to 3 p.m. At lunch, she went to her locker and pulled out her important documents: nursing license, birth certificate, social security card, passport. She stuffed them all into a small zippered pouch and tucked it into her bag. "You okay?" Lena turned to find Sarah Martinez, one of the other nurses, watching her with concern. Sarah was 45, tough as nails, and had a sixth sense for when something was wrong. "Fine," Lena said automatically. "Just organizing." "Lena," Sarah moved closer, lowering her voice. "I'm not blind. I've seen the bruises. I've watched you getting thinner, and I know you've been picking up every extra shift that opens up. I need the money. We all need money, but we don't all look like we're running from something." Sarah pulled out her phone and typed something, then showed Lena the screen, a list of women's shelters and domestic violence hotlines. Just in case, Lena felt tears building again. "Thank you." "You don't have to thank me. Just be safe, okay? Whatever you're planning." "I will." Sarah squeezed her shoulder once, then headed back to the floor. Lena stood there for another moment, looking at the list of resources, thinking about Marco's card in her bra and the coffee shop address in her messages. She wasn't going to a shelter. She was going somewhere else entirely. The question was whether that made her brave or stupid. At 2:45, Lena clocked out. She changed out of her scrubs and into jeans and a sweater, pulling her hair down from its ponytail. Then she walked out of Mercy General like she did every day. Except today, she kept walking. The coffee shop was in Chelsea, a neighborhood Lena rarely visited. Upscale but not ostentatious, the kind of place where people worked on laptops and had conversations in hushed tones. Marco was already there, sitting at a corner table with his back to the wall. He stood when he saw her, and Lena was struck again by the sheer presence of him, the way he seemed to take up more space than his physical form actually occupied. "You came," he said, and there was relief in his voice. "I said I would." People say a lot of things. Marco pulled out a chair for her. "What do you want? Coffee? Food?" "Just coffee. Black." He ordered for both of them, and they sat in silence until the drinks arrived. Lena wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the warmth seep into her perpetually cold fingers. "Did you bring your documents?" Marco asked quietly. She nodded. "Good. Do you have a bag packed at home? Clothes, medications, anything you can't live without?" "I have a go bag, hidden in the closet. He doesn't know about it." "Smart." Marco leaned back slightly, studying her. "How long have you been planning this?" 6 months. Maybe longer. I started the bag after the first time he... She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "The first time he hit you." It wasn't a question, but Lena nodded anyway. "And how many times has it been since then?" I stopped counting. Marco's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "Does he have weapons in the apartment?" "No. At least I don't think so." "What about drugs?" Lena shook her head. "Just alcohol. A lot of alcohol." "Does he have any connection to law enforcement? Any friends who are cops, work in the courts, anything like that?" The questions were clinical, methodical. This wasn't the first time Marco had done this. "His cousin works for the NYPD, Lena said quietly. "Brooklyn precinct. They're close." Something dark flickered across Marco's face. "Okay, that's good to know." "Why does that matter?" "Because it means we need to be careful about how we document things. Some cops look the other way when it's family." Marco pulled out his phone and typed something. "I'm going to ask you some hard questions now. You don't have to answer them if you're not ready." Lena took a sip of her coffee, steeling herself. "Ask." "Has he ever forced you sexually?" The word hung between them like a weight. Lena felt her face burning. "Sometimes," she whispered, "when he's been drinking. He says I owe him because he puts up with my work schedule." "Has he ever threatened to kill you?" "Not in those exact words, but he said things like, 'You're going to be the death of me,' or 'I should just end this.' I don't know if he means it or if he's just..." "It doesn't matter if he means it," Marco interrupted. "Threats are threats. Has he ever hurt you badly enough that you needed medical attention?" "Once, cracked rib. I told the ER I fell down the stairs." "Did they believe you?" "No, but they didn't push it either." Marco made a note on his phone. "Do you have any proof? Pictures of bruises, threatening messages, anything?" Lena pulled out her phone and opened a hidden folder she'd created months ago. Pictures of bruises. Screenshots of text messages. A recording of Derek screaming at her that she'd made one night when things got particularly bad. Marco looked through them all with a carefully neutral expression, but Lena saw his hands tighten around his coffee cup. "This is good," he said finally. "This is evidence. Have you backed these up anywhere?" "Cloud storage. He doesn't know about it." "Even better." Marco looked up, meeting her eyes. "Lena, I need you to understand something. If you decide to leave, really leave, it's going to get worse before it gets better. He's going to look for you. He's going to call you. He's going to try to convince you to come back. And if that doesn't work, he's going to try to scare you into coming back." "I know." "I don't think you do. Men like him don't handle rejection well, especially not public rejection. This is going to hurt his pride, and he's going to want revenge for that." "So what do I do?" Lena heard the desperation in her own voice. "Just stay? Just keep living like this until one day he goes too far. And I end up dead?" "No." Marco's voice turned hard. "You leave, but you leave smart. You leave with protection. You leave in a way that makes it clear there are consequences if he comes after you." "What kind of protection?" Marco was quiet for a long moment. The kind I can provide. And there it was, the offer that had been hanging between them since the subway platform. The kind of protection that came with a price, even if Marco was too polite to say it out loud. What do you want in return? Lena asked quietly. Marco looked almost offended. Nothing. I want nothing in return except to know that you're safe. People don't do things for nothing. Some people do. He leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. Look, I'm not going to lie to you about who I am or what I do. You've probably heard things. Some of them are true, some aren't. But here's what I can promise you. I will keep you safe. I will make sure he can't hurt you again. And I will never, ever ask you for anything you're not willing to give. Lena searched his face for signs of deception and found none. Just certainty. Just that same intensity he'd had when he caught her on the subway platform. Why me? She asked. Why do you care about some random nurse you met on the subway? Marco was quiet for so long that Lena thought he might not answer. Then, my mother. She was in a situation like yours. Different details, same story. By the time she finally found the courage to leave, it was too late. He put her in the hospital for 3 months. She never fully recovered. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just let me help you. Marco pulled out a set of keys and slid them across the table. I have an apartment. Empty right now. Safe building, doorman, security cameras. You can stay there as long as you need to. Lena stared at the keys like they might explode. I can't accept that. Yes, you can. You don't understand. If I just disappear, Derek will do exactly what he was going to do anyway. The only question is whether you'll be somewhere safe when he does it. Marco pushed the keys closer. Take them. At least have them as a backup. Lena's hand shook as she reached for the keys. The metal was warm from Marco's pocket, solid and real. If I do this, she said slowly, if I leave, I can't go back. Not even to get my stuff. He'll be waiting. He'll know. Then we go together, tonight. We get your go bag and anything else you absolutely need, and we leave. You stay at the apartment. I'll have someone handle the lease situation with your landlord. Just like that? Just like that. It sounded too easy. Too simple. Lena had spent months building up scenarios in her mind. All the ways leaving could go wrong, all the complications and consequences. And here was this man, this stranger, offering to handle it all like it was nothing. What time does he usually get home? Marco asked. Not until after midnight. He goes to a bar after dinner. Good. We'll go at 9, fast and efficient, in and out in 15 minutes. Lena's phone buzzed. She looked down and felt her stomach drop. Derek? Where are you? You were supposed to be home an hour ago. Her hands started shaking again. Marco noticed immediately. What does he want? He's asking where I am. I'm supposed to be home already. Tell him you picked up an extra shift. Tell him you'll be late. Lena typed the lie with trembling fingers. They asked me to stay late. Understaffed. We'll be home around 10. The response came back instantly. You better not be lying to me. She showed Marco the message. His expression darkened. How many times does he check up on you in a day? Dozens. Sometimes he calls the hospital to verify I'm actually there. Control. Marco's voice was tight. Classic pattern. He's isolated you from friends? I don't really have friends anymore. They all drifted away after I moved in with him. Because he made it impossible for you to maintain those relationships. Lena nodded, feeling tears building again. It was one thing to know you were in an abusive relationship. It was another to have someone map out the patterns like they were reading from a textbook. I'm so stupid, she whispered. Hey. Marco reached across the table and covered her hand with his. The first time he'd initiated physical contact since catching her on the platform. His hand was warm, solid, steady. You are not stupid. You are surviving. There's a difference. Lena looked down at their joined hands, thinking about how different this felt from Derek's grip. Marco's hand wasn't trapping her. It was anchoring her. What if I can't do this? She asked quietly. Then we wait. We plan. We prepare. There's no deadline here, Lena. This happens on your timeline. But you said, I said it would get worse before it gets better. And it will. But better is still waiting on the other side. Marco squeezed her hand gently, then released it. The question is, how much worse are you willing to let it get? Lena thought about Derek's hands on her arms, the bruises that never healed, the money that disappeared, the way she'd started flinching at sudden movements, at loud voices, at anything that might trigger his anger. She thought about falling on a subway platform and strong hands catching her. She thought about the empty apartment Marco was offering, a place where no one would hurt her, where she could sleep without fear, where she could save money without watching it vanish into bottles. Tonight, she said firmly. We do it tonight. Marco nodded, and Lena saw approval in his eyes. Okay, meet me at this address at 8:30. He wrote something on a napkin, an address in Manhattan, nowhere near her apartment. Don't bring anything Derek will notice is missing, just yourself. Okay. And Lena? Marco waited until she met his eyes. From the moment you walk into that apartment, you're under my protection. He won't touch you again. I promise. Lena wanted to believe him, desperately wanted to believe that it could really be that simple, but she'd learned a long time ago that nothing was ever simple. Still, she pocketed the napkin with the address and the keys to the apartment, and when she stood to leave, she felt lighter than she had in months. Thank you, she said quietly. Marco stood as well, ever the gentleman. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you're safe. Lena walked out of the coffee shop and into the late afternoon sun, checking her phone one more time. 3 more messages from Derek, each one more demanding than the last. In 7 hours, she would be free. She just had to survive until then. The hours between leaving the coffee shop and meeting Marco felt like walking through water. Every minute stretched and distorted, time becoming something thick and resistant that Lena had to push through with conscious effort. She went back to the apartment because she had to. Because disappearing before 9 p.m. would raise alarms she couldn't afford. Because the careful lies she'd constructed, working late, understaffed hospital, home by 10, required her to actually show her face. Derek was exactly where she'd left him that morning, sprawled on the couch with the television blaring and empty beer bottles forming a small fortress around his feet. He looked up when she walked in, and Lena saw the calculation in his eyes as he assessed her mood, her body language, searching for signs of deception. You're back early, he said. It sounded like an accusation. They found coverage. Lena set her bag down carefully, keeping her movements calm and predictable. The keys to Marco's apartment were in her jacket pocket, a hard weight against her hip. I figured you'd rather I come home than rack up more overtime. The lie worked because it appealed to his resentment of her work schedule. Derek grunted and turned back to the television. There's leftover pizza in the fridge. Heat me up a couple slices. Lena moved into the kitchen on autopilot, her mind cataloging everything she'd need to grab when she came back with Marco. The go bag was in the back of the closet, hidden behind winter coats Derek never wore. Her laptop was in her work bag. She'd need that. The tampon box with her emergency cash was in the bathroom. Her grandmother's necklace, the only piece of jewelry she owned that actually mattered, was in a box on her dresser. 15 minutes, Marco had said. In and out. Lena could do 15 minutes. She heated the pizza, watching the cheese bubble and brown under the broiler, and thought about the fact that this was the last time she'd ever do this. The last time she'd serve Derek his dinner like some 1950s housewife. The last time she'd walk on eggshells in her own home. What are you smiling about? Derek's voice cut through her thoughts. Lena hadn't realized she was smiling. She schooled her features into neutrality. Nothing. Just thinking about a patient from today. Good news, for once. Yeah? What kind of good news? Guy came in with chest pain, thought he was having a heart attack. Turned out to be severe anxiety. We got him stabilized and connected with mental health services. The lie flowed easily, built from dozens of real cases she'd worked over the years. Derek didn't care enough to question it. He just grunted again and held out his hand for the plate. Lena gave it to him, then retreated to the bedroom with an excuse about needing to shower before her shift tomorrow. She locked the bathroom door and sat on the edge of the tub, pulling out her phone. 8:15. 15 minutes until she needed to leave. She opened her messages and found Marco's number. Still on? She typed. The response came immediately. I'm already outside your building. Black SUV across the street. Take your time. When you're ready, Just walk out. Lena's heart started hammering. He was here. This was real. This was actually happening. Give me 5 minutes, she wrote back. She stood and looked at herself in the mirror. Same face she'd seen every day for the past 28 years, same dark eyes and sharp cheekbones, same mouth that had learned to smile on command. But there was something different in her expression now, something harder, more determined. You can do this, she whispered to her reflection. Then she unlocked his bathroom door and walked into the bedroom, moving with purpose now. She pulled the go bag from its hiding place and did a quick inventory. 2 changes of clothes, toiletries, copies of important documents she hadn't dared bring to the coffee shop, $300 in small bills, her passport. Everything else could be replaced. Lena shoved her laptop into the bag, then grabbed her grandmother's necklace from the dresser. The box made a small clicking sound as she opened it, and she froze, listening for any sign that Derek had heard. The television kept blaring. No footsteps. No angry voice demanding to know what she was doing. She clasped the necklace around her neck, tucking it under her shirt where it lay against her heart like a talisman. Then she grabbed her work bag, her jacket, and the go bag, taking one last look around the bedroom that had been her prison for 2 years. The bedroom where Derek had first told her he loved her, where he'd first made promises about the future they'd build together, where those promises had slowly curdled into control and violence and fear. Goodbye, Lena whispered to the empty room. Then she walked out into the living room, bags in hand, heart in her throat. Derek looked up from the television, his eyes immediately going to the bags. Where the fuck do you think you're going? Hospital called? Lena's voice was steady, even as her pulse raced. Emergency. They need me to come in now. With all that? Derek stood up and Lena saw the shift in his posture, the coiling tension that preceded violence. What's in the bags, Lena? My work stuff, laptop, change of clothes in case the shift runs long, toiletries. Show me. Derek, I don't have time. I said show me. He was moving toward her now, and Lena felt every muscle in her body screaming at her to run. But she couldn't run. Not yet. Not until she was out the door. She opened her work bag, showing him the laptop and the stack of nursing journals she kept meaning to read. See? Just work stuff. The other bag. That's just clothes and... Derek grabbed the go bag from her hand and dumped its contents on the floor. Clothes spilled out, along with her toiletries, her documents, the $300 in cash. His face went very still, very cold. Emergency shift, he said softly. Right, that's why you packed your birth certificate, your passport, all your cash. Derek, you're leaving me. It wasn't a question. You're actually trying to leave me. Lena backed toward the door, her hands shaking. I can't do this anymore. I can't live like this. Can't live like what? Derek's voice was rising now, that familiar rage building. I give you a place to live. I take care of you, and this is how you repay me? By sneaking around behind my back? By stealing from me? Stealing? That's my money, Derek. Money I earned. Everything in this apartment is ours. You don't get to just take it and run. You haven't contributed to rent in 8 months. You haven't bought groceries. You drink my paychecks and... The slap came so fast that Lena didn't see it coming. One moment she was speaking, the next she was on the floor, her cheek burning, the taste of blood in her mouth. Don't you dare, Derek hissed, standing over her. Don't you dare try to make this my fault. You're the one who's always working. You're the one who's never here. I'm lonely, Lena. I drink because I'm lonely, because my girlfriend cares more about strangers in a hospital than she does about me. Lena touched her lip, and her fingers came away red. You hit me. You made me hit you. You always make me... The apartment door flew open with a crash that made them both jump. Marco DeLuca stood in the doorway, and the look on his face was something Lena had never seen before. Cold. Lethal. The veneer of civilization stripped away to reveal something ancient and dangerous underneath. Get away from her, Marco said, and his voice was so quiet it was almost a whisper. Somehow that made it more terrifying. Derek stumbled backward, confusion replacing rage. Who the fuck are you? The person who's going to give you exactly one chance to walk away from this. Marco stepped into the apartment and 2 other men followed him, Large, professional, the kind of people who made violence look like a career choice. Derek's eyes went wide. You brought muscle? Seriously? This is how you're doing this? I'm not talking to you. Marco moved past Derek like he wasn't there and crouched beside Lena. Can you stand? She nodded, letting him help her to her feet. Her lip was bleeding steadily now, dripping onto her shirt. Get ice, Marco said to one of the men, and the guy disappeared into the kitchen without a word. Derek was backing toward the far wall now, his earlier bravado evaporating. This is breaking and entering. I could call the cops. My cousin's a cop. Call him. Marco didn't even look at Derek. He was too busy examining Lena's face, his jaw tight with barely controlled anger. Please, call him. I'd love to explain to the NYPD why your girlfriend has a split lip and you have my boot print on your door. She was leaving me. I had a right to. You had a right to nothing. Now Marco did look at Derek, and whatever Derek saw in his eyes made him shut up immediately. Here's what's going to happen. Lena is going to gather her things, all of her things, and you're going to stand there quietly while she does it. If you speak, if you move, if you so much as breathe in her direction, my associates here will escort you outside while we finish. Are we clear? Derek's mouth opened, closed. You can't just... One of Marco's men stepped forward, and Derek went silent. Good choice, Marco said. He turned back to Lena, his voice softening. What do you need? Lena pointed to the items scattered on the floor. That stuff. And there's a box in the bathroom, under the sink. The second man moved to collect her belongings, while the first returned with ice wrapped in a dish towel. Marco pressed it gently to Lena's lip. This is going to bruise, he said quietly. We should take pictures for the restraining order. Restraining order? Derek's voice cracked. You're getting a restraining order? Lena, come on, this is crazy. We can work this out. We always work it out. Lena looked at him, really looked at him, and saw him clearly for the first time in months. Not the man she'd fallen in love with 3 years ago. Not the charming guy who'd swept her off her feet with romantic gestures and big promises. This man, the one who drank too much and hit too easily and blamed her for his own failures. We're not working anything out, she said. Her voice was steady, despite the blood, despite the fear, despite everything. I'm done, Derek. I'm done pretending this is normal. I'm done making excuses for you. I'm done. You don't mean that. You're just upset. You're tired. Once you get some rest, you'll see. I see perfectly clearly. Lena took the ice from Marco and held it to her own lip. I see that you hit me. Again. I see that you've been controlling me for 2 years. I see that I've been so scared of being alone that I stayed with someone who treats me like property. I love you. The words hung in the air like a challenge. No, Lena said softly. You don't. Love doesn't leave bruises. Love doesn't steal money. Love doesn't make you afraid to come home. Marco's men had finished collecting her things. One of them held up the go bag, now repacked, along with her work bag and the tampon box from the bathroom. Is this everything? Marco asked. Lena did a final scan of the apartment. 2 years of her life, reduced to 3 bags. Yes. Then let's go. Derek moved then, not toward Lena, but toward the door blocking their exit. You're making a huge mistake. You think he's going to take care of you. He's a criminal, Lena. Everyone knows the DeLucas run half the illegal shit in this city. You're trading me for a fucking mobster. I'm not trading you for anyone. Lena stepped forward, and Derek actually flinched. Good. I'm choosing myself. For the first time in 2 years, I'm choosing what I want. And what I want is to never see you again. You're going to regret this. When he gets bored with you, when he throws you away like trash, you're going to come crawling back. And I'm not going to be here. Good, Lena said simply. Marco nodded to his men, and they moved Derek aside with professional efficiency, not violently, just firmly, making it clear that resistance would be both futile and painful. One more thing, Marco said as they reached the door. He turned back to Derek, and his voice dropped to that dangerous whisper again. If you contact her, if you come near her, if you so much as think about her too hard, you'll answer to me. And trust me when I say you don't want that conversation. Derek's face had gone pale. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Marco's smile was cold. Ask around about me, Derek. Ask what happens to people who hurt women under my protection. Then ask yourself if you really want to test those boundaries. They left Derek standing in the middle of the apartment, surrounded by empty beer bottles and the wreckage of his own rage. The black SUV was exactly where Marco had said it would be. One of his men held the door open while the other loaded Lena's bags into the back. Marco guided her into the passenger seat with a hand on her elbow, gentle but sure. "You're bleeding on your shirt," he said as he slid into the driver's seat. Lena looked down and saw red spots blooming across the white fabric. "It's okay. I have others." "It's not okay. Nothing about tonight is okay." Marco's hands were tight on the steering wheel, his knuckles white. "I should have gone in sooner. I should have—" "You came exactly when you needed to." Lena pressed the ice harder against her lip, wincing at the pressure. "If you'd come earlier, Derek would have fought harder. This way, he was already off balance." "You're rationalizing his violence." "No, I'm acknowledging tactical reality." Lena turned to look at him, this man who'd upended his entire evening to rescue someone he barely knew. You learn patterns when you live with someone like Derek. You learn when to push and when to retreat. You learn how to survive. Marco was quiet for a long moment, navigating through traffic with the easy confidence of someone who knew these streets intimately. "You shouldn't have had to learn those things." "But I did, and now I'm using them to move forward." Lena lowered the ice, checking her reflection in the visor mirror. Her lip was swollen, the cut still seeping blood. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough for documentation." Marco pulled out his phone and handed it to her. "Take pictures. Date and time stamped. We'll need them for the restraining order filing tomorrow." Tomorrow. The word carried weight, a future that extended beyond the next few hours of survival. Lena took several photos, documenting the injury from multiple angles. Then she handed the phone back to Marco and leaned her head against the window, watching the city blur past. "Where are we going?" she asked. "My place first. I want my personal physician to look at your lip. Make sure you don't need stitches." "I'm a nurse. I can tell you right now I don't need stitches." "Humor me." Lena didn't have the energy to argue. She closed her eyes and let the SUV's motion lull her into a state somewhere between sleep and waking. Behind her eyelids, she saw Derek's face when he'd realized she was actually leaving. The shock, the rage, the desperate attempt to make her feel guilty. "You're going to regret this." Maybe she would. Maybe tomorrow she'd wake up in Marco's apartment and panic about what she'd done. Maybe Derek was right, and she was trading one dangerous situation for another. But at least this danger came with a choice. At least Marco had never pretended to be something he wasn't. The SUV pulled to a stop, and Lena opened her eyes to find they'd arrived at a high-rise building in Manhattan. The kind of place with a doorman and a marble lobby and the subtle scent of money that permeated everything. "Mr. DeLuca," the doorman said, tipping his hat. His eyes flickered to Lena's split lip, but his expression remained professionally neutral. "Good evening." "Evening, James. I'm expecting Dr. Morrison in about 20 minutes. Send him straight up." "Of course, sir." The elevator was all mirrors and brass, reflecting Lena's battered face back at her from a dozen angles. She looked away, focusing instead on the floor numbers climbing steadily upward. 23rd floor. Marco's penthouse occupied the entire level. "It's too much," Lena said as they stepped into an apartment that looked like something from a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Furniture that probably cost more than her annual salary. Art on the walls that might have been original. "It's safe," Marco corrected. "That's all that matters right now." He guided her to a leather couch and disappeared into what Lena assumed was the kitchen, returning with a proper ice pack and a bottle of water. "Drink," he said, handing her both. "When's the last time you had anything besides coffee?" Lena tried to remember and couldn't. "The sandwich you gave me yesterday?" Marco swore under his breath. "I'm ordering food. What do you like?" "I'm not hungry." "That wasn't what I asked." Lena sighed, too tired to fight. "Anything. Whatever's easy." Marco pulled out his phone and made a call in rapid Italian. Lena caught maybe one word in 5, but the gist was clear. He was ordering enough food for a small army. "The doctor will be here in 15 minutes. Marco said, settling into a chair across from her. He's discreet. He won't ask questions you don't want to answer. Is he on your payroll? He's someone who understands that not all injuries get reported to authorities. Marco's expression was carefully neutral. And before you ask, yes, he's a real doctor. Board certified, runs a private practice in Chelsea. He just makes house calls for people who value privacy. People like Marco. People in his line of work who couldn't exactly show up at emergency rooms with gunshot wounds. I'm not judging, Lena said quietly. I'm just trying to understand the world I'm stepping into. That's fair. Marco leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Here's the truth. My world is complicated. It's not always legal, but it operates by a code, and that code has rules. One of those rules is that you don't hurt women. You don't hurt kids. You don't prey on people weaker than you. And Derek broke that rule. Derek broke every rule that matters. Marco's voice went hard. Men like him are cowards. They pick targets they think won't fight back. They isolate and control because they're terrified of losing power. But the second someone pushes back, they crumble. Lena thought about the fear in Derek's eyes when Marco's men had moved him aside. He was scared of you. He should be. Are you going to hurt him? Marco met her eyes steadily. Do you want me to? The question hung between them. Lena knew the right answer, the civilized answer, was no. Violence was never the solution. Derek should face legal consequences, not vigilante justice. But she also remembered the feeling of his hand cracking across her face, the bruises that painted her skin purple and yellow and never quite healed before new ones appeared, the fear that had become so constant she'd almost stopped noticing it. I don't know, she admitted. Part of me wants him to suffer the way he made me suffer, but another part of me just wants to forget he exists. Both of those are valid feelings, Marco said, and I'm not going to make that choice for you. If you want legal recourse, restraining order, criminal charges, the full weight of the justice system, I have lawyers who can make that happen. If you want him handled quietly, I have people for that too. What does handled quietly mean? It means he gets a visit from some very serious people who explain, in detail, what will happen if he ever comes near you again. It means he understands that there are consequences beyond the law. It means he spends the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. Lena should have been horrified. This was everything she'd been taught to reject. Violence, intimidation, operating outside the legal system. But instead she felt something almost like relief. Derek had never faced real consequences. His cousin in the NYPD would make sure any charges got buried or reduced. The justice system would give him a slap on the wrist and mandatory anger management classes he'd never attend. But Marco's kind of justice? That would actually stick. Can I think about it? Lena asked. Take all the time you need. We're filing the restraining order tomorrow regardless. That creates a legal paper trail. Everything else is secondary. The doorbell rang, and Marco went to answer it. Lena heard voices in the hallway, Marco's deep rumble and another man's lighter tenor. Then they were entering the living room, and Lena got her first look at the mysterious Dr. Morrison. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes and the sort of face that probably put nervous patients at ease. He carried a medical bag that looked like it had seen some use. You must be Lana, he said, setting his bag on the coffee table. I'm Dr. Morrison. May I take a look at that lip? Lena nodded, and the doctor moved through his examination with practiced efficiency. He cleaned the cut, applied some kind of antiseptic that stung like hell, and then stepped back to survey his work. No stitches needed, but you'll have swelling for a few days. Ice it regularly. Take ibuprofen for pain and inflammation. He pulled out a prescription pad and scribbled something. I'm also prescribing you something to help you sleep. No judgment. I know nights can be difficult after this kind of trauma. I'm a nurse, Lena said. I know what to expect. Knowing and experiencing are different things. Dr. Morrison's smile was gentle. Trust me on this one. Let yourself rest. Let yourself heal. He spent another 10 minutes going over care instructions, then handed Lena several business cards. That's my private number. Call any time if you have concerns. I mean that. Anytime. After he left, Marco ordered Lena to shower while they waited for the food. She stood under water as hot as she could stand, watching pink-tinged streams circle the drain as the blood washed away. Her lip throbbed. Her whole face ached. But underneath the pain was something else, something that felt almost like freedom. She dressed in clean clothes from her go bag and emerged to find that the food had arrived. Marco had laid out what looked like half a restaurant's menu on his dining table. Pasta, bread, salad, grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, things Lena couldn't even identify. "I wasn't sure what you'd want," Marco said, sounding almost sheepish. "So I got options." Lena's stomach growled, betraying her earlier claim that she wasn't hungry. She filled a plate and sat down, taking the first real meal she'd had in days. They ate in comfortable silence, and Lena found herself stealing glances at this man who'd inserted himself into her life with such force. He'd removed his suit jacket, rolled up his sleeves. Without all the expensive trappings, he looked almost normal, almost like someone she might have met at a coffee shop or a bar under different circumstances. "What are you thinking?" Marco asked, catching her staring. "I'm thinking that 24 hours ago, I didn't know you existed. And now I'm sitting in your apartment, eating your food and wearing clothes from a bag that was supposed to be my escape plan for next month. Life comes at you fast." That's an understatement. Lena set down her fork, suddenly exhausted. "I don't know how to thank you for this, for any of this. You don't need to thank me. You just need to let yourself be safe for a while." Marco stood and began clearing plates. "The guest room is through there, fresh sheets on the bed. Bathroom is fully stocked. Take anything you need." "Where will you sleep?" "I have another bedroom. Don't worry about me." Lena followed him into the kitchen, watching as he rinsed dishes with the same efficiency he seemed to bring to everything. "Marco, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Earlier, when you said your mother was in a situation like mine, what happened to the man who hurt her?" Marco's hand stilled in the soapy water. When he spoke, his voice was very quiet. "He disappeared. No body was ever found. My father made sure of it." "Your father? Also in the family business, as I'm sure you've gathered." Marco turned to face her, his expression carefully neutral. "I was 12 when it happened, old enough to understand what had been done, old enough to know that some people deserve what they get. Do you think I'm weak for not wanting that? For Derek, I mean. I think you're human, and I think you're allowed to feel however you feel about this." Marco dried his hands and leaned against the counter. "Revenge is seductive. It feels like justice, but it's also corrosive. It changes you in ways you can't always predict." "You sound like you're speaking from experience." "I am." Marco's smile was sad. "I've done things I'm not proud of. Hurt people who probably deserved it. But I'm not sure it made me feel any better in the long run." Lena studied him, this complicated man with his expensive apartment and his violent profession and his surprising gentleness. "Why are you really helping me? And don't say it's because of your mother. There has to be more to it than that." Marco was quiet for a long moment. "You want the truth?" "Always. I saw you on that platform, and I saw my mother. Not literally. You don't look anything like her, but I saw that same exhaustion, that same kind of trapped desperation, and I thought, if I could help one person, if I could keep one woman from ending up in a hospital bed for 3 months, maybe that would mean something. Redemption. Maybe. Or just basic human decency." Marco pushed off from the counter. "Not everyone in my line of work is a monster, Lena. Some of us are just people doing morally complicated things for morally complicated reasons." "And which one are you?" "I'm still figuring that out." Lena felt herself swaying on her feet, the adrenaline finally wearing off completely. Marco noticed immediately and guided her toward the guest room. The bed was enormous, covered in what felt like genuine silk sheets. Lena sat on the edge and looked up at Marco, the stranger who'd become her savior in the span of a single day. "Thank you," she said again, because she didn't have better words. "Get some rest. We'll tackle tomorrow when it comes." He left, closing the door softly behind him. Lena sat there for another moment, then lay back on the bed fully clothed. She should change into pajamas. She should brush her teeth. She should call someone and tell them she was safe. But exhaustion pulled at her like a tide, and Lena let it take her under. She woke sometime in the night, disoriented and panicking, her heart racing as she tried to remember where she was. Not her apartment, not Derek's apartment. Somewhere safe. Somewhere he couldn't reach her. Marco's apartment. Right. Lena got up and padded into the living room, drawn by the faint glow of city lights through those enormous windows. Marco was there, sitting in one of the leather chairs with a glass of something amber-colored, staring out at the skyline. Couldn't sleep? He asked without turning around. Bad dream. Lena crossed to the window, looking out at Manhattan spread below them like a carpet of stars. How do you live this high up and not feel like you're going to fall? You get used to it. The height, I mean. Eventually it just becomes normal. Lena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware that she was standing in a strange man's apartment in the middle of the night wearing only a t-shirt and yoga pants. But Marco didn't look at her like Derek would have. There was no calculation in his eyes, no ownership. I keep thinking he's going to show up, she admitted quietly, that he's going to find me somehow, that the door's going to crash open, and he won't, Marco said with absolute certainty. I have security on this building that would make Fort Knox jealous. 3 different people would have to fail at their jobs before Derek even got past the lobby, and that's not going to happen. How can you be so sure? Because those 3 people work for me, and they know what happens if they fail. Right. She kept forgetting who Marco really was, what he was capable of. Does it bother you? Marco asked, knowing what I do? Lena considered the question honestly. It should. Everything I've been taught says I should be terrified of you, but I'm not. Maybe I'm just too tired to be scared anymore. Or maybe you recognize the difference between violence that destroys and violence that protects. Marco finally looked at her, his dark eyes reflecting the city lights. I'm not a good man, Lena. But I'm not Derek either. I'll never pretend to be something I'm not. I appreciate that, the honesty, I mean. They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe. Somewhere out there, Derek was probably drinking himself stupid, or raging at empty walls, or calling Lena's phone over and over despite knowing she wouldn't answer. But here, 23 floors above the chaos, Lena felt something she hadn't felt in 2 years. Peace. You should try to sleep some more, Marco said eventually. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Lawyers, paperwork, restraining orders. Will you come with me? To the courthouse, I mean? If you want me there. I do. Lena turned from his window. I don't think I can do this alone. Then you won't have to. Marco stood, setting his empty glass aside. I'll be right there. Every step. Lena nodded and started back toward the guest room, but paused at the doorway. Marco, one more thing. Yeah? Handle it quietly. Derek, I mean. Do whatever you need to do to make sure he understands he can never touch me again. Marco's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture, a kind of satisfaction. Consider it done. Lena went back to bed, and this time, sleep came easier. When she woke again, it was to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee brewing somewhere nearby. A new day. A new life. And somewhere in the city below, Derek was about to learn that some women don't stay down when you knock them to the floor. Some women get back up, and some women have very dangerous friends. The coffee was better than anything Lena had tasted in months. She sat at Marco's dining table, cradling the mug between her palms, watching steam curl upward in lazy spirals while the city woke up beyond the windows. Her lips still throbbed, swollen and tender, but the physical pain felt almost secondary to the strange lightness in her chest. She'd left. She'd actually left. Marco emerged from his bedroom dressed in another impeccable suit, this one charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes. He moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, assembling breakfast like a man who'd long since mastered the art of living alone. How'd you sleep? He asked, setting a plate of eggs and toast in front of her. Better than I expected? Worse than I hoped. Lena picked up her fork, then set it down again. I kept waking up thinking I heard Derek's voice. That's normal. Your brain's still in survival mode. It'll take time to recalibrate. Marco poured himself coffee and joined her at the table. My lawyer's meeting us at the courthouse at 10. Catherine Rains. She specializes in domestic violence cases, and she's relentless. How much is this going to cost me? Nothing. She's already been paid. Lena's jaw tightened. Marco, I can't let you saw it. You're not letting me do anything. I'm choosing to do it. He met her eyes steadily. Consider it an investment in making sure Derek never bothers you again. That's not how investments work. It is in my world. Marco took a sip of his coffee. Eat. You're going to need your strength today. Lena forced down the eggs, though her stomach was still twisted with anxiety. What happens after the restraining order? I can't stay here forever. I need to find an apartment, figure out my lease situation, get my name off the utilities. One thing at a time. Marco's voice was calm, grounding. Right now, we focus on legal protection. Everything else can wait. I have a shift at the hospital tomorrow. I can't just disappear from my job. Did you call them yet? Tell them what happened. Lena shook her head. I don't even know what to say. Sorry I'm late. My boyfriend beat me and I had to flee my apartment. You say you had a personal emergency and you need a few days. That's it. You don't owe them your trauma. Marco pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. Call now, before you lose your nerve. She dialed the hospital's main line with shaking hands, asked for the nursing supervisor, and delivered the lie with surprising steadiness. Personal emergency, need 3 days. Yes, she understood it would be unpaid leave. No, everything was fine, just family matters. The supervisor, a woman named Helen who'd always been kind to Lena, said something that made Lena's throat tighten. If you need resources, Lena, if something's going on that we should know about, the hospital has programs. Thank you, Lena managed. I'm okay. I just need a few days. When she hung up, her hands were trembling. Marco reached across the table and covered them with his own. You did good, he said quietly. I lied to her. You protected yourself. There's a difference. Marco checked his watch. We should leave in 20 minutes. The courthouse gets backed up if you don't get there early. Lena excused herself to get ready, standing in front of the guest bathroom mirror and trying to make herself look presentable. The bruise on her lip had darkened overnight, an ugly purple-black that makeup couldn't quite hide. Her eyes were ringed with shadows that spoke of sleepless nights and accumulated exhaustion. She looked like what she was, a woman who'd been hurt. Part of her wanted to hide it, to cover the evidence and pretend everything was fine, but another part, the part that had finally found enough courage to leave, wanted the world to see, wanted the judge to look at her face and understand exactly what Derek had done. When she emerged, Marco was waiting by the door with her jacket. Ready? No, but let's go anyway. The courthouse was in Lower Manhattan, a massive stone building that seemed designed to intimidate anyone who entered. Marco guided her through security with the ease of someone who'd done this before, his hand a steady presence at the small of her back. Catherine Raines was waiting for them on the 3rd floor, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled into a severe bun. She wore a power suit that probably cost more than Lena's monthly rent and carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd won more battles than she'd lost. You must be Lena, she said, extending a hand. Marco's told me about your situation. I'm sorry you're going through this. Her grip was firm, professional. Not the pitying squeeze Lena had grown to expect from well-meaning strangers. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. Domestic violence cases take priority in my practice. Catherine pulled out a tablet and stylus. I need to ask you some questions. They're going to be difficult, but I need complete honesty if we're going to build a strong case. Can you do that? Lena nodded, settling into a hard plastic chair in the courthouse hallway. Marco sat beside her, close enough to offer support, but far enough to give her space. Catherine's questions were clinical, methodical. How long had she been with Derek? When did the abuse start? Had it been physical from the beginning, or did it escalate? What forms did it take? How often? Had she ever reported it to police? Did she have documentation? Lena answered each question, watching Catherine's stylus move across the tablet screen, reducing her pain into bullet points and legal precedent. It felt surreal, translating violence into evidence. Tell me about last night, Catherine said. What happened when you tried to leave? Lena recounted it all. The bags, the confrontation, Derek dumping her belongings on the floor, the slap that had split her lip. And Mr. DeLuca witnessed this? He was outside. He heard the argument through the door. That's when he came in. Catherine's eyes flickered to Marco. With associates? I wanted to make sure Lena could leave safely, Marco said, his voice carefully neutral. I'm not judging. I'm establishing facts. Catherine made another note. Derek's full name and address? Lena provided the information, feeling strange about reducing Derek to data points. Derek Michael Santos, 29 years old, unemployed, last known address, the apartment they'd shared. Does he have any history of violence? Prior arrests? Restraining orders from other women? I don't know. I never asked. I'll run a background check. Catherine looked up from her tablet. Here's what's going to happen. We're filing for an emergency order of protection today. Given the visible injury and the documented history, the judge will likely grant it temporarily. Then we'll have a hearing in about 2 weeks where Derek can contest it if he chooses. Will I have to see him at the hearing? Possibly, but you'll be in a courtroom with security present. He won't be able to touch you. Catherine's expression softened slightly. I know this is scary, but the alternative is worse. Without legal documentation, he could show up at your work, your home, anywhere. The restraining order gives you protection and gives law enforcement grounds to arrest him if he violates it. Lena nodded, trying to absorb the information. 2 weeks until a hearing. 2 weeks of waiting to find out if Derek would fight back or slink away. One more thing, Catherine said. I'm also recommending you file a police report. I know that's difficult, especially given his family connection to NYPD, but it creates an official record. If he violates the restraining order, that prior report strengthens any criminal case against him. Will they take it seriously? The police, I mean? With photographic evidence and witness testimony? Yes. Catherine glanced at Marco. And frankly, having Mr. DeLuca's name attached to your case will ensure it doesn't get buried. Not everyone at NYPD is corrupt, but the ones who are tend to think twice when the DeLuca family is paying attention. Lena looked at Marco, who met her gaze steadily. Is that true? They'll take this seriously because of you? Let's just say I've built certain relationships over the years. Relationships that prove useful in situations like this. It should have bothered her, the idea that justice might hinge on Marco's influence rather than the merit of her case. But Lena was too tired to care about the moral complexities. If Marco's name meant Derek couldn't make this disappear, she'd take that advantage without apology. Okay, she said. I'll file the report. Catherine stood, smoothing her suit. Good. Let's get the restraining order filed first, then I'll walk you over to the precinct. Fair warning. They're going to ask you the same questions I just did, possibly in even more detail. Stay consistent with your answers. The next 3 hours were a blur of legal paperwork and waiting rooms. Lena signed form after form, her hand cramping around the pen as she initialed and dated and certified that everything she'd said was true to the best of her knowledge. The judge who reviewed her emergency petition was a tired-looking woman in her 60s who'd probably seen 1,000 cases just like Lena's. She read through the documentation with practiced speed, occasionally glancing up at Lena's bruised lip. Ms. Brooks, the judge said finally, I'm granting this emergency order of protection. Mr. Santos is prohibited from contacting you in any way. No calls, no texts, no emails, no social media contact, and no third-party communication through friends or family. He is to stay at least 100 yards away from you at all times. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. Good. A hearing is scheduled for March 1st at 2 p.m. You'll receive official notice of the date and time. Both parties may present evidence and testimony at that time. The judge signed the order with a flourish. Stay safe, Ms. Brooks. Catherine walked them out of the courtroom with a copy of the order tucked into her briefcase. That went well. Now for the police report. The precinct was a different kind of intimidation. All fluorescent lighting and linoleum floors, the smell of old coffee and institutional cleaning products. Lena felt exposed here in a way she hadn't at the courthouse, like walking into enemy territory knowing Derek's cousin might be working just a few desks away. But Catherine navigated the bureaucracy with the skill of someone who'd done this countless times. She spoke to the desk sergeant in low tones, presenting credentials and using phrases like domestic violence victim and emergency documentation that seemed to trigger certain protocols. Within 15 minutes, Lena found herself in a small interview room with a female detective who introduced herself as Sarah Kim. She was Korean American, probably in her late 30s, with kind eyes and the sort of no-nonsense demeanor that came from years of dealing with humanity's worst impulses. "Ms. Brooks," Detective Kim said, settling into a chair across from Lena, "I know you've already been through this today, but I need to hear your story in your own words. Start from the beginning. When did you first meet Derek Santos?" Lena told the story again. 3 years ago, a coffee shop in Brooklyn, Derek had seemed charming and attentive. 6 months of dating before he suggested she move in, promising to make her life easier, to take care of her. The gradual shift from attentive to controlling. The first time he'd grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise, apologizing profusely afterward and blaming stress from his job search. "How many times would you say he physically assaulted you?" Detective Kim asked. "I stopped counting after 20, maybe more. It was mostly grabbing, pushing, sometimes slapping. Last night was the first time he split my lip." "And you have photographs of previous injuries?" Lena pulled out her phone, showing Detective Kim the hidden folder. The detective's expression remained professionally neutral, but something flickered in her eyes, anger maybe, or recognition of patterns she'd seen too many times before. "I'm going to need copies of all of these, and I'd like to take some current photographs of your injuries for our file." The process was mechanical, humiliating. Lena stood against a white wall while Detective Kim photographed her from multiple angles, documenting the bruise on her lip, the finger-shaped marks on her arms that were already yellowing as they healed, the older scars that told stories of violence stretching back months. "Does Derek Santos have any weapons?" Detective Kim asked, setting the camera aside. "Not that I know of." "Has he ever threatened to harm himself if you left?" "No, just threatened to make me regret it." "And his cousin, Officer Santos in Brooklyn, have you had any interaction with him?" Lena's stomach clenched. "Derek mentioned him a few times, said his cousin could make problems go away. I think it was supposed to be a warning." Detective Kim's expression hardened. "Officer Santos is in Brooklyn's 72nd Precinct. I'll make a note that this case should be handled by detectives outside that precinct to avoid any conflicts of interest." "Will that actually help?" "It should. The NYPD takes domestic violence seriously, despite what you might have heard. And frankly, cases that come through Catherine Rains tend to get extra scrutiny. She's filed enough brutality complaints against bad cops that we all know to handle her cases by the book." That surprised Lena. She'd assumed Catherine's reputation came from winning cases, not from holding police accountable. "One more thing," Detective Kim said. "I want to be straight with you about what happens next. We'll file this report. The restraining order gives you legal protection. But realistically, enforcement depends on Derek actually violating the order in a way we can document and prove. If he's smart, he'll stay away. If he's not, and most of these guys aren't, he'll try something stupid. When he does, you call 911 immediately. Don't hesitate. Don't second-guess yourself. Just call." "And what if he's smart? What if he just lets me go?" Detective Kim smiled sadly. "Then you get to move on with your life. But in my experience, men like Derek Santos don't let go that easily. They see their partners as property, and they don't like losing what they think they own." The word settled over Lena like a weight. She'd known that intellectually, had understood that leaving was often the most dangerous time for abuse victims. But hearing it from a detective who'd seen how these situations played out made it feel terrifyingly real. They finished up the paperwork, and Detective Kim walked them out to the precinct lobby. Catherine was there waiting, scrolling through her phone with the impatient air of someone used to billing in 6-minute increments. "All done?" Catherine asked. "For now," Detective Kim said. "Ms. Brooks has my direct number if she needs anything." Outside the precinct, Lena finally allowed herself to breathe. The afternoon sun was too bright after the fluorescent dimness of the interview room, and she blinked against it, disoriented. "You did really well in there," Marco said quietly. He'd been waiting in the lobby the whole time, patient as a statue. "I don't feel like I did well. I feel like I'm going to throw up." "That's also normal." Catherine checked her watch. "I have another client at 4, but I'll be in touch about the hearing. In the meantime, keep documenting everything. If Derek contacts you in any way, screenshot it and send it to me immediately." She disappeared into the city's afternoon crowds, leaving Lena and Marco standing on the precinct steps. "You want to get out of here?" Marco asked. "Please." They walked for several blocks in silence, putting distance between themselves and the precinct. Eventually, Marco guided her into a small park, finding a bench under a tree that was just beginning to show the first hints of spring growth. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I honestly don't know." Lena tilted her head back, letting the weak sunshine warm her face. "Part of me feels relieved, like I finally did something instead of just surviving, but another part keeps waiting for the other shoe to drop. The waiting's the worst part. Your brain wants resolution, either safety or danger, but something definite. This middle ground is exhausting." "You sound like you've been through this before." "Not exactly, but I've seen enough people in crisis to recognize the patterns." Marco was quiet for a moment. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Back in the courthouse, when the judge was reading the restraining order, you smiled, just for a second, but I saw it. What were you thinking?" Lena tried to remember that moment, the judge's voice droning through legal language, the weight of official documentation making her situation real in a way it hadn't been before. "I was thinking that for the first time in 2 years, there's actually a piece of paper that says Derek isn't allowed to hurt me. I know it's just paper. I know it can't actually stop him if he decides to ignore it, but it exists now. It's real. I'm not just imagining that what he did was wrong." "You never needed a piece of paper to validate that." "Maybe not, but it helps." Lena turned to look at Marco, this complicated man who'd appointed himself her protector. "What happens now? I can't stay in your apartment forever. I need to figure out my life." "What do you want to happen?" The question caught her off guard. When was the last time someone had asked her what she wanted? Not what she needed, not what was practical or reasonable, but what she actually wanted? "I want to feel safe," she said slowly. "I want to go back to work without constantly looking over my shoulder. I want to sleep through the night without nightmares. I want to save my money instead of watching it disappear into someone else's addictions. I want—" She stopped, surprised by the heat building behind her eyes. "I want my life back," she finished quietly. "The one I had before Derek, before I started making myself smaller and quieter and more convenient. I want to remember what it feels like to take up space without apologizing for it." Marco nodded, and something in his expression made Lena think he understood exactly what she meant. "Then that's what we'll work toward." He pulled out his phone and typed something. "I know a real estate agent who specializes in quick, discreet placements. She can find you an apartment with good security, somewhere Derek would never think to look for you. I can't afford Manhattan rent, so we look in Queens or Brooklyn, somewhere with a doorman and cameras, somewhere that requires 2 forms of ID to get past the lobby." Marco looked up from his phone. "What's your budget?" Lena did some quick mental math. Her salary minus student loans, minus bills, minus the emergency fund she'd been slowly rebuilding. "Maybe $1,500 a month? That's pushing it, honestly." "We'll find something." Marco stood, offering her his hand. "Come on, I'll buy you coffee and we'll start apartment hunting." "You don't have to do all this." "I know I don't have to. I want to." Marco pulled her to her feet. "Besides, I've got a vested interest in making sure you stay safe. Otherwise, Derek might do something stupid and I'd have to handle it. Much easier if you're in a secure building where he can't reach you." There was something in the way he said it, "handle it," that reminded Lena exactly who Marco was. This wasn't just charity. This was strategy. Marco was thinking 3 moves ahead, anticipating problems and eliminating them before they could manifest. She should probably be more concerned about that, about the kind of man who talked about handling problems with such casual certainty. But instead, she felt something almost like gratitude. They found a coffee shop that wasn't too crowded and claimed a corner table. Marco pulled out his laptop while Lena nursed a cappuccino and tried not to think about how much her life had changed in 48 hours. 2 days ago, she'd been working a double shift at Mercy General, counting down the hours until she could go home. Except home had stopped feeling like home somewhere along the way, transforming instead into a battleground where she never knew which version of Derek would be waiting. Now home was a concept rather than a place, something she was actively rebuilding from scratch. Marco's real estate agent responded quickly, sending over a list of available apartments that met his specifications. They scrolled through listings together, Marco pointing out security features while Lena tried to imagine herself living in these anonymous spaces. This one, she said, stopping on a studio in Astoria. It's in my price range, and it's near a subway stop. First floor apartment. No good. Why not? Ground floor means someone could break a window and climb through. You want third floor or higher. High enough that climbing isn't easy, low enough that you could get out in an emergency. Lena had never thought about her living space in such tactical terms, but Marco moved through the listings with the precision of someone conducting a security assessment, eliminating options based on factors she wouldn't have considered. What about this one? He turned the laptop toward her. Fourth floor, controlled access building, security cameras in the lobby, and all hallways. Landlord's one of mine. He owes me a favor. I can get you a lease without the usual credit checks and references. One of yours. Someone who's used my services in the past and appreciates discretion. Marco's smile was slight. Benefits of knowing the right people. The apartment was small but clean, with updated appliances and a bathroom that didn't look like it required a hazmat suit. The rent was $1,600, slightly above her budget, but not impossibly so. Can I think about it? Take all the time you need. I'll have her hold it for 48 hours. Marco closed the laptop. But Lena, you're going to have to make decisions eventually. I know everything feels overwhelming right now, but paralysis won't protect you. Action will. He was right. She'd spent 2 years in paralysis, frozen by fear and hope that Derek would somehow change. Taking action, leaving, filing reports, finding a new apartment, felt terrifying but also necessary. Okay, she said. Sora, tell her I'll take it. I can move in as soon as the lease is ready. I'll let her know. Marco made the call right there, speaking in low tones to someone named Maria. When he hung up, he was smiling. She'll have the lease ready by tomorrow morning. You can move in this weekend. This weekend. Less than a week after collapsing on a subway platform, Lena would have a new apartment, a fresh start. It should have felt exciting. Instead, it felt surreal, like she was living someone else's life. Her phone buzzed, and Lena's heart stopped when she saw the name on the screen. Derek. Don't answer it, Marco said immediately. I'm not. But look. She showed him the screen, 15 missed calls, 23 text messages, all from the past hour. Marco's expression darkened. He knows about the restraining order. Process server must have found him. Lena opened the messages with shaking hands, then immediately wished she hadn't. They started angry, accusations and demands that she come home, that she stop being dramatic, that she drop the charges. Then they shifted to desperate, Derek claiming he was sorry, that he loved her, that they could work this out if she just gave him another chance. The final message made her blood run cold. You think a piece of paper is going to stop me? You think you can just throw away 3 years like it meant nothing? You're mine, Lena. You'll always be mine. Screenshot that and send it to Catherine, Marco said, his voice tight with controlled anger. And to Detective Kim. He just violated the restraining order. He didn't threaten me directly. Your mine is absolutely a threat. It's possessive language that implies ownership. Combined with a piece of paper won't stop me, it constitutes a clear violation. Marco pulled out his own phone. I'm calling Catherine now. While Marco spoke to the lawyer, Lena sat frozen, reading and rereading Derek's messages. Part of her had hoped he'd simply accept the restraining order and move on, find some other woman to control and manipulate. But Detective Kim had been right. Men like Derek didn't let go easily. Catherine's filing a violation report with the court, Marco said, returning his attention to Lena. This will strengthen your case at the hearing. It also means Derek could be arrested if he continues to contact you. Could be, not will be. Unfortunately, enforcement can be inconsistent. That's why your physical safety matters more than legal documentation. Marco leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. Lena, I need you to understand something. Derek is escalating. The messages, the violation. He's testing boundaries, seeing what he can get away with. This is the dangerous phase. What do I do? You block his number. You don't respond to any messages, no matter what he says. You vary your routine. Don't go to the same places at the same times. You stay alert, and you trust that I'm handling the situation on my end. That last part made Lena pause. What does that mean? Handling the situation? Marco was quiet for a long moment. It means Derek is going to receive a visit tonight from some associates of mine. They're going to explain in terms he can't misunderstand what will happen if he continues to violate the restraining order. You're going to hurt him. I'm going to scare him. There's a difference. Marco's expression was carefully neutral. Derek operates on intimidation and control. He understands power dynamics. What he doesn't understand yet is that he's not the biggest threat in your life anymore. Once he realizes that, once he understands that touching you means answering to me, he'll back off. Lena should have objected, should have insisted on handling this through legal channels, but she kept thinking about Derek's last message. You're mine, Lena. You'll always be mine. Will it work? She asked quietly. It's worked before. Marco reached across the table, covering her hand with his. Trust me on this. By tomorrow morning, Derek will understand that his options are to leave you alone or face consequences that make a restraining order look like a suggestion. Lena looked down at their joined hands, thinking about how much her life had changed in just 2 days. How a stranger on a subway platform had somehow become the person she trusted most in the world. Okay, she said finally. Do what you need to do. Marco nodded and pulled out his phone, stepping away from the table to make a call. Lena watched him through the coffee shop window, speaking in low, intense tones to whoever was on the other end. His body language was different now, less gentle protector, more dangerous predator. She wondered what he was arranging, what methods his associates would use to make Derek understand. Part of her didn't want to know, but another part, the part that still felt Derek's hand cracking across her face, hoped it would hurt. Marco returned and settled back into his seat. It's handled. They'll pay him a visit tonight around 11. Make sure he understands the new rules. Will you tell me what they do? Do you want to know? Lena considered that. No, I just want it to be over. Then it will be. Marco checked his watch. It's getting late. We should head back. You must be exhausted. They walked back to Marco's building through streets painted gold by the setting sun. Lena felt hollowed out, scraped clean by the day's emotional gauntlet. Filing reports and recounting trauma had left her feeling exposed, like a nerve pulled from protective tissue. Back in the apartment, Marco ordered dinner while Lena showered, letting hot water wash away the day's accumulated stress. When she emerged, there was Thai food waiting, and Marco had changed out of his suit into jeans and a sweater that made him look almost normal. They ate in comfortable silence, and Lena found herself watching Marco with new eyes. He'd been nothing but kind to her, nothing but protective. But she'd seen glimpses of something else today. The way he'd spoken to his associates, the casual way he'd mentioned having Derek handled, the connections he had with lawyers and real estate agents and people who owed him favors. Can I ask you something? Lena said finally. Always. Earlier you said some of your associates would visit Derek tonight. What exactly are they going to do? Marco set down his fork, considering his answer carefully. They're going to have a conversation. Make it clear that the restraining order isn't just a piece of paper. It's backed by people who take violations very seriously. They'll explain that contacting you again would be a mistake, a costly one. You're not answering my question. I'm answering it as honestly as I can without giving you information that might implicate you later. Marco met her eyes steadily. You want plausible deniability, Lena. You want to be able to say truthfully that you didn't know what methods were used, just that Derek stopped bothering you afterward. He was right. But it still felt like cowardice, letting someone else handle her problems with violence while she pretended not to know. I'm not a good person, Lena said quietly. A good person wouldn't want this, wouldn't let you do this. A good person recognizes when the system fails and finds alternative solutions. Marco reached across the table. You tried the right way. You filed reports, got a restraining order, did everything you were supposed to do, but we both know that's not always enough. Sometimes you need something more. Something like you. Something like me, Marco agreed. They cleaned up dinner together, moving around the kitchen in easy synchronization. It struck Lena how domestic this felt. Sharing space, sharing silence, the comfortable routine of two people who'd somehow become partners in the span of 48 hours. I should let you get some rest, Marco said eventually. Tomorrow we'll sign your lease and start moving your things from storage. I don't have anything in storage. Everything I own fit in those 3 bags. Marco's expression softened. Then tomorrow we'll go shopping. get you furniture, kitchen supplies, everything you need to make that apartment feel like home. I can't let you pay for all that. Consider it a loan. You can pay me back when you're stable. Marco guided her toward the guest room. For now, just focus on healing. Everything else will fall into place. Lena wanted to argue, to insist on maintaining her independence, but exhaustion was pulling at her again, making her limbs heavy and her thoughts slow. Thank you, she said instead, for everything. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's a new day. Lena closed the guest room door and collapsed onto the bed, not even bothering to change into pajamas. She should have felt relieved. The restraining order was filed, the police report was documented, Marco was handling Derek. Everything was proceeding according to plan. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd crossed some kind of line, that by accepting Marco's help, by allowing him to handle Derek through extra-legal means, she'd compromised something fundamental about herself. Or maybe she'd just finally acknowledged what she'd always known, that sometimes the right thing and the legal thing weren't the same. That sometimes justice required getting your hands dirty. Her phone buzzed one final time before she blocked Derek's number. One last message that simply said, "This isn't over." Lena deleted it without responding and turned off her phone completely. Derek was wrong. It was over. She'd made sure of that. Lena woke to silence so complete it felt unnatural. No blaring television, no bottles clinking, no angry voice demanding to know where she'd been or what she'd done wrong. Just the soft hum of climate control and morning light filtering through unfamiliar curtains. She lay still for several minutes, letting the peace settle over her like a blanket. Her lips still ached where Derek had split it, but the pain felt distant now, manageable, evidence rather than ongoing trauma. Her phone sat dark and silent on the nightstand where she'd left it. She'd turned it off completely last night, unable to handle even the possibility of another message from Derek. Now, in the cold light of morning, she powered it back on and watched notifications flood the screen. 12 missed calls from Derek, 37 text messages. The first few were angry, demanding, then pleading, then angry again. The pattern repeated until around 11 p.m. when they stopped completely. Lena's stomach clenched. 11 p.m. Exactly when Marco had said his associates would visit. The final message, time-stamped at 10:58 p.m., read, "I'm sorry. I'll leave you alone. Just please tell them to stop. Tell them to stop." So Marco's people had already made contact, had already delivered whatever message they'd been sent to deliver. Lena should have felt guilty, should have been horrified that she'd unleashed violence on someone she'd once loved. But all she felt was relief so profound it made her dizzy. She forwarded the final message to Catherine Rains with a brief note. "Derek sent this last night, then stopped contacting me completely." The lawyer's response came within minutes. "Perfect. This establishes a pattern of harassment followed by sudden cessation. Strengthens our case that he understands the consequences of continued contact." "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected," Lena typed back. "Moving into new apartment today." "Good. Stay vigilant. First few weeks are critical." Lena set her phone aside and ventured out into the main living area. Marco was already up, dressed in casual clothes that probably still cost more than her monthly salary, standing at the kitchen counter with a cup of coffee and a tablet. "Morning," he said, looking up. "How'd you sleep?" "Like the dead." Lena accepted the coffee he poured for her. "Derek stopped messaging last night, around 11. "I know." Marco's expression was carefully neutral. "My people reported in. The conversation was productive." "Did they hurt him?" "They explained consequences. Whether Derek felt hurt by that explanation is between him and his choices." Marco set down his tablet. "He won't bother you again. I'm certain of that." Lena wanted to ask for details, wanted to know exactly what had been said, what had been done, what had made Derek go from threatening to apologetic in the span of minutes. But Marco was right. Plausible deniability mattered. "Thank you," she said instead. "Don't thank me for doing what should have been done months ago." Marco's voice held an edge she hadn't heard before. "You shouldn't have needed my intervention. The system should have protected you." "But it didn't." "No, it didn't." Marco pulled up something on his tablet. "Your lease is ready. Maria says we can sign this morning and you can move in immediately. I've also arranged for a furniture delivery this afternoon. basics to start with. Bed, couch, table, kitchen supplies. Marco, I can't let you We've been through this. It's a loan. You'll pay me back. He looked up, his dark eyes serious. Or don't. I'm not keeping a ledger, Lena. I'm just making sure you have what you need to rebuild your life. Lena felt tears building and blinked them back. Why are you doing this? And don't say it's because of your mother. There has to be more to it. Marco was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee like it held answers. When I was 12, I watched my mother waste away in a hospital bed. 3 months of recovery from injuries that should have killed her. And the whole time she kept apologizing. To me, to my father, to the nurses. Like she was sorry for being a victim. Like she'd somehow brought it on herself. He paused, and Lena saw grief flicker across his face. I swore then that I'd never let another woman apologize for being hurt. That if I ever had the power to help someone in that situation, I would. Marco met her eyes. You collapsed into my arms on a subway platform. That made you my responsibility. Not because I own you or because you owe me something, but because I have the resources to help and you needed help. It's that simple. Nothing about you is simple. Fair point. Marco's smile was slight. But my motivations in this are, I want you safe. I want you free from Derek's control. I want you to have the chance to remember who you were before he started breaking you down. Everything else is just logistics. Lena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They finished their coffee in comfortable silence. Then Marco drove her to a nondescript office building in Queens, where Maria, the real estate agent, waited with paperwork. Maria was a compact woman in her 50s with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She barely glanced at Lena's lack of recent pay stubs or references, focusing instead on getting signatures where they needed to go. Building has a doorman from 6 a.m. to midnight, Maria explained, handing Lena 2 sets of keys. After midnight, you need a key fob to access the lobby. Cameras in all common areas, including the stairwells. Your apartment's on the 4th floor, east-facing windows. Quiet neighbors, mostly young professionals and retirees. What about visitors? Can anyone just walk in? Doorman calls up before letting anyone to your floor. You can put names on a pre-approved list if you want, or you can require a call every time. Maria pulled out a form. I'd recommend the call every time option for now. Better safe than sorry. Lena filled out the form, leaving the pre-approved list blank except for Marco's name. She had no one else to add anyway. Derek had seen to that over the past 2 years, slowly cutting her off from friends and coworkers until her entire social circle consisted of him and the people she worked with. You're all set, Maria said, gathering the signed documents. Welcome home, Ms. Brooks. The apartment was exactly as advertised, small but clean, with windows that actually opened and plumbing that didn't make concerning noises. The walls were a neutral beige that Lena would probably hate in a few months, but right now felt like possibility. A blank canvas waiting to be filled. What do you think? Marco asked, watching her move through the empty space. I think it's perfect. Lena stood in the middle of the living room, turning slowly. It's mine, really mine. Derek's never been here. He doesn't know where it is. This space is completely untouched by him. That was the idea. Marco checked his watch. Furniture delivery should be here in an hour. You want to grab lunch while we wait? They found a small Vietnamese place 2 blocks from the apartment, the kind of hole-in-the-wall spot that served massive bowls of pho and had exactly 3 tables. Lena ordered without looking at the menu, suddenly starving in a way she hadn't been in weeks. When's your court hearing? Marco asked, pulling out his phone to check something. March 1st, 2 weeks from today. Lena wrapped her hands around her water glass. Catherine thinks Derek won't show up, that he'll let the restraining order become permanent by default. She's probably right. Men like Derek are cowards at heart. Once they realize they can't intimidate you anymore, they move on to easier targets. Marco's expression darkened, which is its own kind of tragedy. You think he'll find someone else to hurt? I think men like him don't suddenly become better people just because one woman got away. They just get better at hiding what they are. Marco looked up from his phone. But that's not your problem to solve. Your job is to heal and move forward. Let Derek be someone else's cautionary tale. The pho arrived, steaming and fragrant. and Lena lost herself in the ritual of adding herbs and lime and sriracha. Simple pleasures she'd forgotten during the years of walking on eggshells, too anxious to enjoy food. "I've been thinking about work," she said between bites. "I need to go back. I can't afford to take much more unpaid leave." "How do you feel about that? Going back to Mercy General?" "Nervous. Derek knows where I work. He could show up." "He could," Marco agreed. "But he won't. Not after last night. And even if he did, the restraining order gives the hospital grounds to have him removed immediately. Plus, I can arrange for some additional security if it would make you feel better." "Additional security meaning your people?" "Meaning professionals who know how to maintain a low profile while keeping you safe." Marco pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. "This is a company I work with occasionally. They do executive protection, private security, that kind of thing. I could have someone stationed near the hospital during your shifts. You'd never even know they were there." Lena looked at the card. A simple black design with a phone number and the words Sentinel Security Solutions. No address, no website, just that number. "How much would that cost?" "Already paid for. 2 weeks of coverage starting whenever you go back to work." "Marco." "It's an investment in my peace of mind," he interrupted gently. "I need to know you're safe. This lets me know that. Take it or don't, but the service is already arranged." Lena pocketed the card, too tired to argue. The truth was, the idea of having someone watching over her did make her feel safer, even if that someone was connected to Marco's complicated, probably illegal business dealings. They finished lunch and headed back to the apartment just as the delivery truck arrived. 2 men in matching uniforms unloaded furniture with practiced efficiency. A bed frame and mattress, a comfortable-looking couch in soft gray fabric, a small dining table with 2 chairs, kitchen essentials, bathroom supplies, even bedding and towels still in their packaging. "This is too much," Lena said, watching them work. "It's the minimum you need to live comfortably." Marco was directing traffic, telling the men where to place each item. "Everything else you can acquire over time." By late afternoon, the apartment had been transformed from empty shell to livable space. The furniture was arranged, the bed was made, the kitchen cabinets were stocked with basic supplies. Lena stood in her new bedroom, staring at a bed that was hers and hers alone, and felt something crack open in her chest. "You okay?" Marco asked from the doorway. "I haven't slept alone in 3 years," Lena said quietly. "Even on nights when Derek passed out on the couch. I was always aware of him, always listening for his footsteps, waiting to see what mood he'd be in when he came to bed." "You don't have to listen anymore." "I know, it's just going to take some getting used to." Lena turned to face him. "Will you stay, just for tonight? I know that's probably weird to ask, but I don't think I can handle being alone yet, not in a new place where I don't know the sounds." Marco hesitated, and Lena saw him weighing the request. "I can stay on the couch. Make sure you feel secure for the first night." "Thank you. But tomorrow you start building independence. I can't be your security blanket forever, Lena. You need to learn to feel safe on your own." He was right. She knew he was right. But tonight, with Derek's final threatening message still fresh in her mind, and the restraining order still feeling like inadequate protection, she needed the comfort of knowing someone else was there. They ordered takeout for dinner, Chinese this time, eating straight from the containers while sitting on Lena's new couch. The television was still in its box, so they talked instead, sharing stories that had nothing to do with violence or fear or the complicated circumstances that had brought them together. Lena learned that Marco had a younger sister who lived in Boston, that he'd never been married, that he collected vintage watches, and had a weakness for old film noir movies. Small details that made him feel more human and less like the dangerous protector who'd crashed into her life. "What about you?" Marco asked. "What did you want to be when you were a kid? Before nursing, I mean." "A writer." Lena smiled at the memory. "I was going to write novels, epic fantasies where women saved themselves in the world instead of waiting for princes." "What happened?" "Reality. Student loans. The practical realization that writing doesn't pay bills." She shrugged. "Nursing was supposed to be the responsible choice. Stable income, job security, making a real difference. And I do make a difference. I know I do. But sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to chase the impractical dream. It's not too late. You're 28, not 80. 28 with crushing debt and no savings and a restraining order against my ex-boyfriend. Not exactly the ideal circumstances for pursuing creative passions. Maybe not ideal, Marco agreed, but circumstances change. 6 months from now, you might be in a completely different place. A year from now, you might be writing that novel. Lena wanted to believe him, wanted to imagine a future where she wasn't just surviving, but actually living, where she had the space and freedom to chase dreams instead of just avoiding nightmares. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "And you can tell me if it's too personal." "Go ahead." "Do you have nightmares? About the things you've done? The people you've hurt?" Marco was quiet for a long time, staring at his half-empty container of lo mein. "Sometimes. Not as often as I probably should. I've made peace with most of my choices, even the bad ones. But every now and then I'll wake up at 3 a.m. and wonder if there was a different path I could have taken, a way to help people without becoming what I've become." "Do you regret it? The life you've chosen?" "Regret implies I had a real choice. I was born into this family, this business. I could have walked away, sure, but that would have meant abandoning everyone who depended on me. So I stayed, and I tried to do it better than my father did. Tried to build something that wasn't just violence and intimidation." He looked at her. "I'm not sure I've succeeded, but I'm still trying." Lena heard the weight in his words, the complicated moral calculus of a man trying to do right within a fundamentally wrong system. She reached over and squeezed his hand. "For what it's worth, I think you're succeeding, at least with me. One success doesn't erase a lot of failures." "Maybe not, but it's still worth counting." They cleaned up dinner together, and Lena showed Marco where the extra blankets were stored. He set himself up on the couch with the ease of someone who'd slept in worse places, and Lena retreated to her bedroom with a strange mix of gratitude and guilt. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of her new home. The building settled and creaked around her. Someone's television played muffled dialogue through the walls. A car alarm went off in the distance, then stopped. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. No angry footsteps. No bottles clinking. No voice raised in accusation. Lena closed her eyes and, for the first time in years, fell asleep without fear. She woke once in the night, disoriented and reaching for her phone to check for angry messages. But there was nothing. Derek was silent. The apartment was peaceful. And in the living room, Marco's steady breathing reminded her that she wasn't alone. Morning came too quickly. Lena emerged from her bedroom to find Marco already awake, making coffee in her new kitchen like he'd been doing it for years. "Sleep okay?" he asked. "Better than I have in months." Lena accepted the coffee gratefully. "Thank you for staying." "No problem. But remember what I said. Tonight you're on your own. You need to prove to yourself that you can do this." "I know." Lena took a sip of coffee, then glanced at her phone. Still nothing from Derek. "It's strange. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for him to show up or find a way around the restraining order, but there's just silence." "That's what we wanted, isn't it? For him to leave you alone?" "Yes, but it feels too easy. Like any minute he's going to—" Her phone rang, and Lena nearly dropped her coffee. But it wasn't Derek. It was Detective Kim. "Ms. Brooks, I wanted to follow up on your case. We tried to conduct a wellness check on Derek Santos this morning, see how he was responding to the restraining order." Lena's stomach clenched. "And?" "He's gone. Cleared out of the apartment overnight. Landlord says he left a note saying he was moving back to his family in New Jersey. No forwarding address." Lena looked at Marco, who was watching her with carefully neutral expression. "He left the city." "Appears so. We're still trying to locate him to serve notice about the upcoming hearing, but it looks like he's decided to cut his losses and disappear." Detective Kim paused. "This is actually good news, Ms. Brooks. It means he's not likely to be a continued threat. Or it means he's planning something. That's possible too. Which is why I'm recommending you maintain all security precautions. Don't let your guard down just because he's not immediately visible." After the call ended, Lena turned to Marco. "Did you know about this? That he'd leave town?" "I suspected it might happen. Men like Derek are cowards. When they realize they've lost control of the situation, they run. Marco set down his coffee. My associates were very clear about the consequences of staying in New York, very clear about what would happen if he continued to pursue you. He made the smart choice. You scared him out of the city. I gave him options. He chose the one that kept him alive and uninjured. Marco met her eyes. Are you upset about that? Lena thought about it. Derek was gone, fled like the coward he was, leaving her to pick up the pieces of the life he'd helped destroy. She should probably feel some kind of compassion for him, some remnant of the love that had brought them together 3 years ago. But all she felt was relief. No, she said finally, I'm not upset. I'm grateful. Good, because you've got bigger things to worry about now, like going back to work and rebuilding your life. Marco checked his watch. I need to head out, handle some business, but I'll check in later, make sure you're settling in okay. After he left, Lena spent the morning making her apartment feel more like home. She unpacked the few belongings she'd brought from Derek's place, hanging her grandmother's necklace on a hook by the bathroom mirror where she could see it every day. She arranged her nursing journals on the small bookshelf Marco had ordered. She made herself lunch and ate it at her new table, savoring the simple pleasure of choosing what and when to eat without anyone's approval. Around 2 p.m., her phone rang again. This time it was Helen from the hospital. Lena, hi. I wanted to check in, see how you're doing. When do you think you'll be ready to come back? Lena looked around her apartment at the new life she was building. Monday. I'll be ready to come back Monday. Are you sure we can give you more time if you need it? I'm sure. I need the routine. Need to feel useful again. Okay, I'll put you on the schedule for Monday morning, 7 a.m. shift. And Lena, if you need anything at all, you let me know. After hanging up, Lena called the number on the Sentinel security card Marco had given her. A professional-sounding woman answered on the second ring. Sentinel Security, how can I help you? My name is Lena Brooks. Marco DeLuca arranged protection for me starting Monday. Yes, Ms. Brooks, we have you in our system. You'll be working at Mercy General Hospital, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. shifts? That's right. Perfect. You won't see our personnel, but they'll be there. If you notice anything concerning anyone watching you, following you, anything that makes you uncomfortable, you call this number immediately and we'll respond. Thank you. Stay safe, Ms. Brooks. Lena spent the rest of the weekend settling in, taking long walks around her new neighborhood, learning the rhythm of streets where Derek had never walked. She bought groceries at a bodega where the owner didn't know her history. She found a coffee shop with decent Wi-Fi and friendly baristas. She slowly assembled a life that belonged entirely to her. Sunday night, she stood at her bedroom window watching the city lights and thinking about how much had changed in 1 week. 7 days ago, she'd been trapped in an apartment with a man who hurt her. Now she was free, protected, moving forward. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marco. How are you feeling about tomorrow? Nervous but ready, she typed back. Thank you for everything. You don't need to keep thanking me. Just stay safe and keep moving forward. That's all I want. Lena smiled and set her phone aside. Tomorrow she'd go back to work. Back to saving lives and making a difference. Back to being the person she'd been before Derek had started tearing her down. And this time, she'd do it knowing that she was stronger than she'd ever realized. That she'd survived the worst and come out the other side. That she'd fallen and someone had caught her. And then she'd learned to stand on her own. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and the promise of rain. Lena dressed in fresh scrubs, pulled her hair back and checked her reflection. The bruise on her lip had faded to a yellowish green, barely noticeable under a light application of makeup. She looked like herself again, maybe even better than herself. There was something different in her eyes now, a kind of hardness that hadn't been there before. The look of someone who'd been tested and hadn't broken. The subway ride to Mercy General felt both familiar and foreign. Same route she'd taken 5 days a week for 2 years, but everything looked different now. Brighter, somehow. More possible. She didn't see the security personnel Marco had arranged, but she felt their presence. A man in a business suit reading a newspaper who got on her subway car. A woman in workout clothes who happened to be walking the same direction toward the hospital. Professional, invisible, protective. Helen met her at the nurse's station with a tight hug. It's good to have you back. We've been worried about you. I'm okay, better than okay, actually. Good, because we're slammed today. 3 admissions waiting, 2 discharges to process, and Mrs. Chen in 407 is demanding to speak to you specifically about her medication schedule. Lena smiled. Normal problems. Manageable problems. Problems that had nothing to do with violence or fear or men who thought they owned her. Let's get to work, she said. The shift passed in a blur of familiar routines, taking vitals, administering medications, answering call lights, comforting worried families. Lena moved through it all with renewed focus, remembering why she'd chosen this profession in the first place. She was on her lunch break, eating a sad cafeteria sandwich in the break room when Sarah Martinez sat down across from her. You look different, Sarah said, studying Lena's face. Good different. I feel different. Lena touched her healing lip self-consciously. I left him. Derek. I actually left. I can see that. Sarah's smile was warm. I'm proud of you. That takes real courage. It took hitting rock bottom and help from someone unexpected. Whatever it took, you did it. That's what matters. Sarah pulled out her phone. Listen, some of us are getting together Friday night. Just drinks, nothing crazy. You should come. Meet people who aren't patients or assholes who hit you. Lena felt something warm bloom in her chest. A social invitation. The beginning of rebuilding connections Derek had systematically destroyed. I'd like that, she said. The rest of the shift passed without incident. No sign of Derek, no threatening messages, just work and patience and the steady rhythm of healing. When Lena finally clocked out at 3 p.m., she stepped outside to find the rain had started. But instead of making her feel miserable, it felt cleansing. Like the universe was washing away the last remnants of her old life. She pulled out her phone and texted Marco, "First day back done, no problems." His response came quickly. "Told you it would be fine. Proud of you." Lena smiled and headed toward the subway, ready to go home to an apartment that was truly hers, ready to sleep in a bed without fear, ready to wake up tomorrow and do it all again. This was what freedom felt like. This was what she'd been fighting for without even knowing it, and she was never giving it up again. The weeks that followed developed their own rhythm, different from anything Lena had known before. She woke each morning in her own bed, sunlight streaming through east-facing windows, and took her time getting ready without watching the clock with dread. She went to work, came home, cooked dinner in a kitchen where no one criticized her choices. She read books she'd been meaning to read for years. She started writing again, just journal entries at first, then fragments of stories that had been locked away during the Derek years. Marco checked in regularly but kept his distance, giving Lena space to find her footing. They met for coffee once a week, casual conversations that had less to do with restraining orders and security protocols and more to do with normal things. Movies they'd seen, books they'd read, the small pleasures of everyday life. You're different, Marco observed one Saturday afternoon as they sat in a cafe near Lena's apartment. More present. I feel more present. Like I've been living underwater for 2 years and finally came up for air. Lena stirred sugar into her coffee. It's strange. I keep waiting for something terrible to happen, for Derek to show up or for some other disaster to strike, but life just keeps being normal. That's what recovery looks like. Boring, uneventful normality. Marco smiled. It's a good sign. The hearing's next week, March 1st. Part of me hoped Derek would just let it go, not show up. But Catherine says he filed a response. He's actually going to contest the restraining order. Marco's expression darkened. He's in New Jersey. He fled the city. What possible grounds does he have to contest? Apparently he's claiming I'm lying about the abuse, that I fabricated everything to justify leaving him for someone else. Lena's hands tightened around her mug. His lawyer's arguing that the night you came to the apartment, you were my secret boyfriend, and we staged the whole thing. That's insane. That's Derek. He can't accept responsibility for anything, so he invents a narrative where he's the victim. Lena took a breath, forcing herself to stay calm. Catherine says it won't work. We have too much documentation, the photos, the police report, the text messages. But I still have to sit in a courtroom and listen to him lie about what he did to me. You want me to come with you? Can you? I know it's asking a lot. Lena. Marco reached across the table and took her hand. I'll be there. You shouldn't have to face him alone. The relief Lena felt was overwhelming. She'd built up strength over the past few weeks, learned to sleep without fear, and walk without constantly looking over her shoulder. But the thought of seeing Derek again, of hearing his voice after all this time, still made her heart race with remembered terror. "Thank you," she whispered. "Always." They spent the rest of the afternoon walking through Astoria, Marco pointing out his favorite restaurants and shops, Lena slowly expanding her mental map of this neighborhood that was becoming home. It felt natural, comfortable, like they'd been friends for years rather than strangers brought together by crisis. "Can I ask you something?" Lena said, as they paused in front of a bookstore window. "And you can tell me it's none of my business." "Go ahead. Are you seeing anyone? Dating, I mean?" She kept her eyes on the book display, unable to look at him directly. "It just occurred to me that you've spent the past month helping me rebuild my life, and I don't know anything about yours." Marco was quiet for a moment. "No, I'm not seeing anyone." "Why not?" "Because my life is complicated. Most women don't want to date someone who operates in the gray areas I operate in." He paused. "And the ones who do usually want something from me. Money, status, protection. It gets exhausting trying to figure out who's genuine." "That sounds lonely." "It is what it is." Marco turned to face her. "Why are you asking?" Lena finally met his eyes, seeing something in them she hadn't noticed before. Or maybe she'd noticed and chosen to ignore it, too focused on her own survival to consider what Marco might be feeling. "I'm asking because somewhere over the past month, you stopped being just the man who saved me on the subway platform. You became someone I look forward to seeing, someone whose opinion matters, someone I—" She stopped, suddenly uncertain. "I don't know what I'm trying to say." "I think you do." Marco's voice was soft. "But I also think you need more time. You just got out of a relationship that nearly destroyed you. The last thing you need is to jump into something new before you've had time to heal." He was right. Lena knew he was right. But there was something between them now, something that had been building since that first moment when he'd caught her before she hit the ground. Not just gratitude or obligation, but genuine connection. "What if I said I don't want to wait?" Lena asked quietly. "Then I'd say you're not thinking clearly, that you're confusing rescue with romance." Marco reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture achingly gentle. "I care about you, Lena, more than I probably should, but I won't take advantage of your vulnerability. When something happens between us, if something happens between us, it needs to be because you're whole and choosing freely, not because I helped you escape Derek." Lena felt tears building. "You're a better man than you give yourself credit for." "I'm a man who knows the difference between what I want and what's right. That doesn't make me good. It just makes me patient." Marco stepped back, putting careful distance between them. "Let's get through the hearing first. Then you keep building your life. If in 6 months or a year you still feel this way, we'll talk. Deal?" "Deal," Lena agreed, even though waiting felt impossible. They walked back to her apartment in comfortable silence, and Lena found herself thinking about what Marco had said. He was right about her needing time to heal, to rediscover who she was outside of Derek's shadow. But he was also wrong about something fundamental. She wasn't confusing rescue with romance. She'd seen Marco's kindness, his patience, the way he'd never once made her feel obligated or owned. That wasn't the behavior of a man who'd saved her. That was the behavior of a man who saw her as an equal. But she could wait. She'd already proven she was strong enough to survive. She could prove she was strong enough to be patient, too. The week before the hearing crawled past with agonizing slowness. Lena went to work, came home, tried to keep her mind occupied with anything other than imagining what Derek would say in court. Catherine called twice to review Lena's testimony, making sure she could present the facts clearly and calmly without breaking down. "He's going to try to get a reaction from you," Catherine warned. "His lawyer is going to paint you as emotionally unstable, vindictive, someone who can't be trusted. You need to stay composed no matter what they say." "I can do that." "I know you can. Just remember, the evidence speaks for itself. Photos don't lie. Police reports don't lie. Text messages don't lie. All you have to do is tell the truth and let the documentation back you up." The night before the hearing, Lena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, playing through worst-case scenarios. What if the judge didn't believe her? What if Derek's lawyer was convincing enough to create reasonable doubt? What if she had to go back to looking over her shoulder, waiting for Derek to reappear? Around 2 a.m., she gave up on sleep and made herself tea, sitting at her kitchen table and watching the city lights. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marco. "Can't sleep either?" "How did you know?" she wrote back. "Because I know you. You're probably sitting in your kitchen right now, catastrophizing about tomorrow." Lena smiled despite herself. "Am I that predictable?" "You're that human. It's normal to be scared. What if it goes wrong? Then we deal with it. But it won't go wrong. Catherine's the best, and you have the truth on your side. Derek's just desperate and delusional. Will you really be there, in the courtroom?" "Front row. You won't be able to miss me." Lena felt some of her anxiety ease. Whatever happened tomorrow, she wouldn't face it alone. "Thank you," she typed, "for everything. I know I keep saying that, but I mean it. Get some sleep, Lena. Tomorrow we end this chapter for good." She went back to bed, and this time, exhaustion pulled her under into dreamless sleep. The courthouse was just as intimidating as Lena remembered. She met Catherine in the hallway outside the courtroom, the lawyer looking sharp and professional in a navy suit that probably cost more than Lena's monthly rent. "Derek's here," Catherine said without preamble. "With his lawyer and his cousin from NYPD. They're trying to intimidate you before we even start. Don't let them." Lena's stomach clenched. "His cousin?" "Officer Santos. He's here as a character witness, apparently." Catherine's expression was grim. "It's a tactic. They're trying to use his badge to add legitimacy to Derek's claims. But the judge knows what they're doing. She's seen this playbook before." Marco appeared then, dressed in a dark suit that made him look dangerous and powerful and exactly like the man Derek would fear. He took one look at Lena's face and moved to her side immediately. "You okay?" "No, but I'll manage." Lena straightened her shoulders. "Let's get this over with." They entered the courtroom together, and Lena felt Derek's eyes on her immediately. She refused to look at him directly, keeping her gaze forward as Catherine guided her to the plaintiff's table. But she could feel his presence like a physical weight, that familiar sense of being watched and judged and found wanting. The judge entered, the same tired-looking woman who'd granted the emergency restraining order, and called the court to order. Derek's lawyer spoke first, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit who painted Derek as a devoted boyfriend betrayed by a woman having an affair. "Mr. Santos and Ms. Brooks were in a committed relationship for 3 years, the lawyer said smoothly. During that time, Mr. Santos supported Ms. Brooks emotionally and financially while she worked demanding hours at the hospital. He never raised a hand to her, never threatened her. The injuries Ms. Brooks claims he inflicted were either self-inflicted or caused by her actual partner, Mr. Marco DeLuca, as part of an elaborate scheme to justify abandoning Mr. Santos." Lena's hands clenched in her lap. The lies were so blatant, so absurd, that she couldn't believe anyone would take them seriously. But Derek's lawyer delivered them with such conviction that she felt a flicker of doubt. Catherine stood for her rebuttal, and her voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. "Your Honor, the defense's claims are not only false, they're insulting. Ms. Brooks has provided extensive documentation of Mr. Santos's abuse, photographs of injuries taken over several months, text messages containing threats and controlling language, a police report filed the day after Mr. Santos struck her hard enough to split her lip. Mr. DeLuca didn't even meet Ms. Brooks until the night she collapsed from exhaustion and malnutrition on a subway platform, a collapse directly caused by Mr. Santos's financial abuse and controlling behavior." The judge looked down at the file in front of her. "I've reviewed the documentation. Ms. Brooks, I'd like to hear from you directly. In your own words, describe the nature of your relationship with Mr. Santos." Lena stood on shaking legs and took a breath. This was it, her chance to tell the truth and be believed. "Derek and I met 3 years ago," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "For the first 6 months, he was wonderful. Attentive, romantic, everything I thought I wanted. He suggested I move in with him, said it would make my life easier since I was working so many hours at the hospital. I thought it was a good idea." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "The controlling behavior started gradually. First, it was just wanting to know where I was all the time. Then it was questioning who I spent time with. Then it was getting angry if I made plans without checking with him first. By the time I realized what was happening, I was completely isolated. No friends, no social life outside of work, just Derek and his constant surveillance. When did the physical abuse begin? The judge asked. About a year into living together. The first time he grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. He apologized immediately, said he'd been stressed, promised it wouldn't happen again. But it did. Over and over, grabbing, pushing, slapping. It escalated slowly enough that I kept making excuses for him. And the night of February 14th, when you left? Lena detailed the events, working the double shift, collapsing on the platform, Marco catching her, coming home to Derek's rage, the bags dumped on the floor, the slap that split her lip. Mr. DeLuca and his associates came because I told him earlier that day about Derek's abuse. He was concerned for my safety, and he was right to be concerned because Derek hit me within minutes of my arriving home. Derek's lawyer jumped to his feet. Objection. Ms. Brooks is characterizing my client's actions in the worst possible light while providing no corroboration. I have corroboration, Catherine said smoothly. Mr. DeLuca witnessed the assault through the apartment door. Dr. Morrison examined Ms. Brooks that same night and documented her injuries. And we have photographs taken by both Mr. DeLuca and Detective Sarah Kim of the NYPD showing the injury in question. She presented the photos, and even from across the room, Lena could see the judge's expression harden as she reviewed them. Derek's lawyer called Officer Santos to the stand, and the cop did his best to paint Derek as an upstanding citizen who'd never shown violent tendencies. But under Catherine's cross-examination, he admitted he hadn't actually spent much time with Derek over the past 2 years, that his opinion was based more on family loyalty than actual observation. Then Derek himself took the stand, and Lena had to watch him lie under oath. He claimed she'd been cheating on him for months, that the bruises were from roughhousing that had gotten out of hand, that he'd never threatened her, never controlled her finances, never done any of the things she'd documented so carefully. She wanted an excuse to leave me for that mobster, Derek said, gesturing toward Marco. So she made up a bunch of lies and got her rich boyfriend to intimidate me into going along with it. Catherine's cross-examination was surgical. She walked Derek through his employment history, or lack thereof, made him explain how he'd been supporting himself while living in Lena's apartment, forced him to account for the threatening text messages he'd sent after being served with the restraining order. You told Ms. Brooks, and I quote, "You're mine. You'll always be mine." What did you mean by that, Mr. Santos? Derek stumbled. I just meant we had history together, that she couldn't just erase what we'd built. And when you said, a piece of paper won't stop me? What were you implying? I wasn't implying anything. I was just upset. People say things when they're upset. People say revealing things when they're upset, Mr. Santos. And what you revealed was a belief that Ms. Brooks belongs to you and that legal protections mean nothing to you. Catherine let that hang in the air for a moment. No further questions. The judge called for a short recess, and Lena practically ran from the courtroom. She made it to the bathroom before the tears started, great heaving sobs of relief and rage and accumulated stress. Marco found her there, leaning against the sink and trying to pull herself together. You did great in there, he said quietly. I feel like I'm going to throw up. That's normal. You just confronted your abuser in open court. You're allowed to fall apart a little. Marco handed her a paper towel. But we're almost done. Just the judge's ruling, and then it's over. They returned to the courtroom to find the judge already back on the bench. She looked at both parties with an expression that gave nothing away. I've reviewed all the evidence presented, she said, and I've heard testimony from both parties. This case is unfortunately typical of many domestic violence situations I see. One party claiming abuse, the other claiming fabrication. However, in this case, the documentation is extensive and compelling. Lena held her breath. The photographs of injuries spanning several months, combined with text messages showing controlling and threatening behavior, combined with testimony from law enforcement and medical professionals, paint a clear picture. Ms. Brooks has met her burden of proof. The emergency restraining order is hereby made permanent. Mr. Santos is prohibited from contacting Ms. Brooks in any way for a period of 5 years. He is to stay at least 500 yards away from her at all times. Violation will result in immediate arrest and criminal charges. The judge's gavel came down like a thunderclap. This court is adjourned. Lena sat frozen, barely able to process what she'd just heard. She'd won. The restraining order was permanent. Derek couldn't touch her, couldn't contact her, couldn't come near her for 5 years. She turned to Marco and found him smiling, genuine warmth in his dark eyes. "It's over," he said. "You're free." Catherine gathered her papers with the satisfied air of someone who'd never doubted the outcome. "He'll probably try to appeal, but it won't go anywhere. The evidence is too strong. For all intents and purposes, Derek Santos is out of your life." Lena looked across the courtroom and saw Derek being led out by his lawyer and his cousin. For just a moment, their eyes met. And what Lena saw there wasn't rage or hurt. It was defeat. The look of a man who'd finally lost something he couldn't manipulate or control his way back into having. She turned away, refusing to give him even that small moment of her attention. Outside the courthouse, the early March sun felt like a blessing. Lena tilted her face toward it and breathed deeply, feeling lighter than she had in years. "Thank you," she said to Catherine, "for everything. Just doing my job. But you did the hard part. You left, you documented, you followed through. A lot of women can't manage all three." Catherine shook Lena's hand. "If you ever need anything else, you have my number." After the lawyer left, Lena and Marco stood on the courthouse steps in companionable silence. "What now?" Marco asked. "Now I figure out what the rest of my life looks like." Lena smiled. "I'm thinking I start with lunch, maybe somewhere celebratory. I know just the place." They ended up at a small Italian restaurant in Little Italy, the kind of place where Marco was greeted by name and shown to the best table without asking. They ordered too much food and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than Lena's weekly grocery budget. "To freedom," Marco said, raising his glass. "To freedom," Lena echoed and took a long drink. The wine loosened something in her chest, all the tension she'd been carrying for weeks finally releasing. She told Marco about her plans, to start writing more seriously, maybe take a class, to reconnect with the few friends Derek hadn't completely driven away, to save money and pay off her student loans and build a life that was entirely her own. "What about nursing?" Marco asked. "Are you staying at Mercy General?" "For now. But I've been thinking about travel nursing. 6-month contracts in different cities, good pay, a chance to see the country." Lena played with her wine glass. "I spent 2 years trapped in one place. I think I need to move around for a while." "That makes sense." Marco's expression was carefully neutral. "When would you start?" "Not for a while. I need to stabilize first. Save some money. Probably not until summer at the earliest." She paused. "Would you mind if I left New York?" "It's not about what I mind. It's about what you need." Marco reached across the table and took her hand. "I told you before. When something happens between us, it needs to be because you're choosing freely. If traveling is what you need to feel free, then you should do it." "But what if—" Lena stopped, unsure how to articulate what she was feeling. "What if I come back? After traveling, I mean. What if I come back and you've moved on?" "Then we'll deal with that when it happens." "But, Lena, you can't make decisions about your life based on what might happen with me. You need to make decisions based on what's right for you." He was right, again. But it didn't stop the ache in her chest at the thought of leaving him behind. They finished lunch and walked through Little Italy, stopping in shops and bakeries, Marco buying her cannoli and teaching her enough Italian to order coffee. It felt like a date, except it wasn't. It was something more complicated, two people dancing around feelings neither was quite ready to name. "I should get home," Lena said eventually. "Early shift tomorrow." Marco walked her to the subway, and they stood on the platform waiting for her train. Lena wanted to say something meaningful, to acknowledge what the day had meant and what Marco had done for her, but the words felt inadequate. "I'll see you Saturday?" Marco asked. "Coffee, like usual?" "I'd like that." The train arrived and Lena stepped toward it. Then, on impulse, she turned back and kissed Marco's cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me when I was invisible, for catching me when I fell. For everything." Marco's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. "You were never invisible. You just needed someone to remind you that you mattered." Lena got on the train with tears in her eyes, watching Marco disappear as the subway pulled away from the platform. The spring turned into summer, and Lena's life developed a new normal. She worked her shifts at the hospital, saved her money, went out with coworkers, and slowly rebuilt her social circle. She wrote every night, filling notebooks with stories about women who saved themselves. She took a creative writing class at a community college and joined a writers' group that met every other Tuesday. And she saw Marco every Saturday for coffee, their friendship deepening even as they maintained careful boundaries. "I applied for a travel nursing contract," she told him one Saturday in June. 3 months in Montana, starting in August. Marco's expression flickered. Disappointment, maybe, though he hid it quickly. "Montana, that's far." "That's the point. I need to see what the world looks like when I'm not afraid all the time." Lena wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. "But I'll be back. The contract ends in November, and then we'll see where we both are." Marco smiled. "It's good, Lena. You spreading your wings. I'm proud of you." "Will you miss me?" "Every day, but that's not a reason for you not to go." The weeks before Lena left passed in a blur of preparation. She gave notice at Mercy General, packed her apartment into storage, said goodbye to the life she'd built in New York. It felt both terrifying and exhilarating, this leap into the unknown. The night before she left, Marco took her to dinner at an upscale restaurant overlooking the East River. They didn't talk about her leaving. Instead, they talked about everything else. Books, movies, memories from the past 6 months. "I have something for you," Marco said as dessert arrived. He handed her a small wrapped box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a pair of wings. "So you remember that you can fly," Marco said quietly. "And so you remember to come back." Lena felt tears building. "Marco, don't. Just take it, and know that wherever you go, whatever you do, you'll always have a place here. With me." She clasped the bracelet around her wrist, feeling its weight like a promise. Montana was beautiful and strange and exactly what Lena needed. She worked at a small hospital in a town where nobody knew her history, where she could be anyone she wanted to be. She hiked mountains on her days off. She wrote stories about survivors and fighters and women who refused to stay broken. And she texted Marco every day, sharing photos and stories and the small details of her new life. "How's the writing going?" he asked one night. "Good. I think I might actually have a novel here. It's rough, but it's mine. I always knew you had it in you. Miss you," she typed, then hesitated before hitting send. "Miss you too. But I'm proud of you for doing this." November came faster than Lena expected. Her contract ended and she packed her bags with the same mix of excitement and nervousness she'd felt leaving New York. Except this time, she wasn't running from something. She was running toward it. Marco met her at the airport, and Lena spotted him immediately in the arrivals area. He looked the same, dark hair, expensive suit, that intensity that had first caught her attention on a subway platform 8 months ago. But when she ran to him and he caught her in his arms, lifting her off the ground in a hug that spoke of months of missing each other, everything felt different. "Welcome home," he said against her hair. "I'm home," Lena agreed, and knew she meant it. They went to dinner that night, and this time when Marco took her hand across the table, it felt like the beginning of something rather than a promise deferred. "I thought about you every day," he said. "Wondered if you'd actually come back or if Montana would steal you away permanently. I thought about you too. About this. About us." Lena laced their fingers together. "I needed to prove to myself that I could be okay alone. That I didn't need someone to save me. And I can. I am. But that doesn't mean I don't want you in my life." Want me in what capacity?" "In whatever capacity you'll have me." Lena smiled. "I'm whole now, Marco. I'm choosing freely, and I choose you." Marco leaned across the table and kissed her, gentle and certain and full of promise. When they broke apart, Lena saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Hope. "I've been waiting 8 months to do that," he admitted. "Was it worth the wait?" "Absolutely." They took things slowly after that, building a relationship on the foundation of friendship they'd already established. Lena found a new apartment, her own place, paid for with her own money, a space that was entirely hers. But she spent most nights at Marco's penthouse, learning the rhythms of living with someone who respected her boundaries and celebrated her independence. She started writing full-time, using her savings and picking up occasional nursing shifts to pay the bills. Marco offered to support her financially, and Lena refused, needing to prove she could do this on her own terms. "I'm not Derek," Marco said one night when she declined his offer for the third time. "You know that, right? I want to help because I love you, not because I want to control you." "I know, but I need to do this myself to prove I can." Lena kissed him. "Ask me again in a year when I've sold my novel and I'm rich and famous." Deal. A year later, Lena did sell her novel. A story about a nurse who escapes an abusive relationship and finds herself through travel and writing and the help of an unexpected ally. Her editor called it raw and powerful and exactly what readers need right now. The advance wasn't huge, but it was enough. Enough to pay off her student loans. Enough to feel like maybe she'd actually made it as a writer. Marco took her out to celebrate, and over champagne he pulled out a small velvet box. "Before you panic," he said, "this isn't what you think it is." Inside was a key. "Key to what?" Lena asked, confused. "A brownstone in Brooklyn. 3 bedrooms, home office space, big kitchen. I bought it last month." Marco watched her carefully. "I was thinking you might want to move in. Officially. But only if you're ready. No pressure, no expectations. Just an offer." Lena looked at the key, then at Marco, then back at the key. A year ago, the thought of living with someone would have terrified her. But Marco had spent the past 12 months proving that love didn't have to mean control, that partnership could mean growth instead of confinement. "I'm ready," she said. "Let's go home." They moved into the brownstone together, filling it with books and art and the comfortable chaos of 2 lives merging. Lena wrote in the mornings, picked up nursing shifts a few days a week to stay sharp, spent evenings cooking dinner with Marco and talking about their days. It was normal. Beautifully, perfectly normal. 2 years after collapsing on a subway platform, Lena stood in that same station and looked around. Different now. They'd renovated, replaced the old tile with new. But she remembered exactly where she'd been standing when her knees had buckled, exactly where Marco had caught her. "What are you thinking?" Marco asked, appearing at her side with coffee. "I'm thinking about how different everything is now, how one moment changed my entire life." Lena leaned into him. "What if you hadn't been there that night? What if you'd been on a different train, in a different car? Then someone else would have caught you, or you would have caught yourself." Marco wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "You give me too much credit. I just helped you find the strength you already had." "Maybe, but I'm still glad it was you." Their train arrived, and they boarded together, heading home to the life they'd built. A life that was messy and complicated and sometimes difficult, but always honest. Always chosen. Lena touched the bracelet on her wrist, the wings Marco had given her before Montana, and thought about how far she'd flown, how far she still had to go. 6 months later, Marco proposed for real. Not with a grand gesture or a public spectacle, just a quiet moment in their kitchen on a Sunday morning. "Marry me," he said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. "Yes," Lena answered, just as simply. They married in a small ceremony at City Hall, surrounded by the friends Lena had rebuilt connections with and the few family members Marco still spoke to. Catherine Rains attended, along with Detective Kim and Dr. Morrison. Sarah from the hospital brought the entire nursing staff from Lena's old unit. It was perfect, small and intimate, and exactly what they both wanted. For their honeymoon, Lena chose Montana, showing Marco the mountains she'd hiked, the hospital where she'd worked, the coffee shop where she'd written the first chapters of her novel. They spent 2 weeks hiking and talking and planning the future they'd build together. "I want kids eventually," Lena said one night as they watched the sunset from their rental cabin. "Not right away, but someday." "Someday sounds perfect." Marco pulled her closer. "We've got time." They did have time. All the time in the world to build the life they wanted, to make mistakes and fix them, to grow together instead of being broken apart. Lena's second novel came out to even better reviews than the first. This one was about redemption and second chances, about finding love after trauma, about the complicated morality of protecting the people you care about. Critics called it unflinching and emotionally resonant. Readers called it the most honest portrayal of recovery I've ever read. Marco read it in one sitting and cried at the ending. "Is this how you see me?" he asked, holding up the book. "The character based on me, is this really how you see me?" "Yes, as someone complicated and dangerous and impossibly kind. Someone who saved me not by being perfect, but by being present." Lena took his hand. "Why? Is it wrong?" "No, it's just—" Marco shook his head. "I've spent my whole life being one thing to the world and something else in private. You're the first person who's ever seen both sides and accepted them." "That's what love is," Lena said simply. "Seeing someone completely and choosing them anyway." 3 years after the subway platform, Lena found out she was pregnant. The news came as a surprise. They'd been trying, but not seriously, just letting nature take its course. Still, seeing those 2 lines on the test made everything feel suddenly real. Marco's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. Joy and fear and overwhelming tenderness all mixed together. "We're going to be parents," he said, hands on Lena's still flat stomach. "We're going to be parents," she agreed. Their daughter was born on a snowy January morning, exactly 4 years after that night on the subway platform. They named her Sophia Grace. Sophia for Marco's mother, Grace for the gift of second chances. Holding her daughter for the first time, Lena thought about how far she'd come. From the woman who'd almost hit a subway platform to the woman who'd built a life beyond anything she'd dared imagine. From victim to survivor to someone who'd learned to thrive. "What are you thinking?" Marco asked, watching her with their daughter. "I'm thinking that I'm grateful for all of it, even the hard parts, because those hard parts led me here." Lena looked up at him. "To you, to her, to this life we've built. No regrets? Not a single one." Years passed. Sophia grew into a fierce, independent child who inherited her mother's stubbornness and her father's intensity. Lena kept writing, publishing book after book, each one exploring different aspects of survival and strength and love. Marco slowly transitioned his business interests toward legitimate enterprises, building something he could be proud to pass on to his daughter. They had hard days, of course, moments when old fears resurfaced or new challenges seemed insurmountable. But they faced them together, 2 people who'd learned that strength didn't mean never falling. It meant getting back up. It meant catching each other when one of you stumbled. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Marco took Lena back to that subway platform. "Why here?" she asked, looking around at the familiar space. "Because this is where it started, where I caught you and you grabbed on and we both refused to let go." Marco pulled her close. "I wanted to stand here and remember that moment and thank whatever force in the universe put me on this platform that night." Lena leaned into him, feeling safe and loved and home. "I think about it sometimes, about how different everything could have been if you hadn't been there, if I hadn't left, if Derek had, but he didn't, and you did, and I was." Marco kissed the top of her head. "We can't live in the what-ifs, Lena. We can only live in the what is. And what is, this life we've built. It's more than I ever dreamed possible." "Me too." They stood there for a long moment. 2 people who'd found each other in the darkness and built something beautiful in the light. Around them, the city rushed and moved and lived, full of other stories, other falling people waiting to be caught. But this was their story. The one that began with a collapse and ended with a life fully earned. The one that proved love didn't have to hurt. That strength could be found in vulnerability. That sometimes the person who saves you is the one who teaches you to save yourself. Lena touched her bracelet, those silver wings she'd worn every day for years, and smiled. She'd learned to fly, and she'd chosen to land right here, in this life, with this man, building this future. It was more than enough. It was everything.